Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Nightmare Narratives. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious. Where are you watching from and what time is it in your part of the world? Now find your cozy spot and relax. My name is Michael Santos. I'm a park ranger at Death Valley National Park, and I'm starting to think I might be going crazy. Or maybe the desert is. Either way, something's not right out here. It started 3 weeks ago. I woke up before sunrise, like I always do, ready to start my morning patrol. The air felt different that day, charged somehow. As I stepped outside my cabin, I heard it. A strange crackling sound, like radio static. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The thing is, static like that shouldn't happen in the dry desert air. There's nothing to cause electrical discharge out here, but there it was, growing louder as the sun came up. Ever since Korea, my hearing hasn't been right. Artillery blast during my tour took care of that. The doctors call it tinnitus, a constant, high-pitched whine that never goes away. But lately that whine has been changing, shifting into something else. Sometimes I swear I can hear voices in it. This morning was worse than usual. The air tasted like copper pennies and smelled like the inside of a radio. That weird ozone smell when electronics heat up. I've never felt anything like it before, not even during electrical storms. I was heading toward the western ridge when I found it. An old aircraft, partially buried in the sand. Must have crashed during training exercises back in '42. Most of it was rusted away, but the radio, that thing looked brand new. Impossible, but there it was. And it was on, broadcasting something. I leaned in closer to listen and my blood went cold. Mayday, mayday, we're going down. Coordinates. The voice faded into static. Then another voice cut in. We've lost our tail gunner. Heavy flak over. More static. Then another voice. And another. All of them scared. All of them dying. All of them from different decades, different wars. I backed away so fast I tripped over my own feet. But the voices followed me. Because when I got back to my Jeep, my old field radio from Korea, the one I keep in a footlocker and haven't touched in 10 years, was crackling with life. It shouldn't have been working. The battery died years ago. But there it was, spitting out transmissions from my old unit. The same unit I listened to die one by one while I sat safe at base camp. I shut it off and drove like hell back toward the ranger station. That's when I saw them. The Patterson family from Ohio, Dad under the hood of their overheated station wagon, Mum fanning herself with a map, 2 kids sitting on a blanket playing with a portable radio. The boy was turning the dial, but every station was playing the same thing. Distress calls, final messages, last words. You hearing this weird stuff on the radio? Mr. Patterson called out when he saw my Jeep. Never heard anything like it. Thought it was a War of the Worlds broadcast at first. I nodded and mumbled something about atmospheric conditions. Didn't tell him I was hearing the same thing without a radio. Didn't tell him that the rocks around us, those red-colored ones, with high iron content, were probably acting like antennas, pulling in signals from God knows where. And I definitely didn't tell him that I'd started hearing my own voice among the transmissions. My voice calling for help, reporting my own death in a dozen different ways I'd never experienced. Instead, I offered to call a tow truck from the station. As I started to leave, the younger Patterson kid couldn't have been more than 8, tugged at my sleeve. Ranger Mike, he whispered, the radio people are talking about you. I drove back to the station in silence, but the static followed me. Through my tinnitus, through the Jeep's radio, through the very air itself, and underneath it all, a sound I hadn't heard in 10 years, but would never forget, the whop, whop, whop of helicopter blades from Korea, getting louder with each passing minute. Back at the station, I pulled out the area maps. There was something about this particular section of Death Valley that had always seemed strange. The Native American petroglyphs nearby showed figures holding rectangular objects up to their ears. Objects that looked a lot like radios, carved thousands of years before radios existed. I was studying these when my radio crackled again. This time, it wasn't just one frequency, it was all of them at once. FM, AM, shortwave, military bands, all bleeding into each other, coming through a single speaker that shouldn't have been working in the first place. And underneath it all, my damaged hearing picked up something new. My tinnitus was changing pitch like a warning alarm. Outside, the air shimmered strangely, heat waves bending in ways they shouldn't, showing glimpses of places that weren't. There, I grabbed my gear and headed out again. Had to check on the Pattersons, make sure they were okay. As I drove, the helicopter sounds got louder. Not just in my head now. The Patterson kids heard it too. Their car radio was picking up emergency broadcasts from travelers who died in this same stretch of desert decades ago. "Carburetor shot," Mr. Patterson told me, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Tow truck coming." I nodded, but my attention was on the ridge behind them. There was something up there I'd never noticed before, what looked like a metal door built into the rock face, a bunker of some kind. "Stay with your family," I told Patterson. "I need to check something out." As I hiked toward the ridge, the voices in my head grew louder. My unit from Korea, calling for extraction that would never come, and now mixed in with them new voices, the Pattersons crying for help. But they were still alive, still standing by their car in the distance. I wasn't just hearing the past anymore, I was hearing the future. The bunker door was heavy, but unlocked. Military communications equipment lined the walls, old Cold War stuff that should have been decommissioned decades ago. But every light was on, every meter bouncing, every speaker alive with voices. That's when I saw it for the first time, the air itself twisting into a human shape made of static and sound waves, and it was speaking with 1,000 dying voices. All at once. I wasn't crazy after all. I just wished I was. I backed away from the static figure, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The shape flickered like a bad TV signal, sometimes looking human, sometimes just a blur of moving dots. But its voice, that was the worst part. It spoke using the voices of dead soldiers, their words mixing together like a broken record. "Help, position overrun, tell my wife, going down, need extraction." I recognized some of those voices. Men from my unit in Korea. Men whose last words I'd heard over the radio years ago while I sat safe at base camp. That's when it hit me. This thing, whatever it was, hadn't found me by accident. It had been drawn to me. My guilt over surviving when my friends died had turned me into some kind of antenna for these transmission wraiths. That's what I decided to call them. Creatures that feed on last words, on final goodbyes, on desperate calls for help that never get answered. I ran from the bunker, stumbling down the rocky slope toward where the Patterson family waited. I needed to warn them, to get them away from this place before. Too late. When I reached their car, Mrs. Patterson was speaking into their car radio, but the words weren't hers. "Engine failure, due going down. Coordinates 36.5, 117.2. She blinked and looked confused when she saw me staring. "Sorry, what was I saying? I just felt dizzy for a second." Her husband hadn't noticed anything wrong, still tinkering with the car engine. But the kids had. They were watching their mother with wide, frightened eyes. "We need to leave," I said. "Right now. Tow truck or no tow truck." As if to answer me, every piece of radio equipment in the area came to life at once. The Pattersons, car radio, my handheld unit, even an old transistor radio the kids had been playing with. Each one broadcasting on different frequencies, from different times. World War II commands, Korean War distress calls, Vietnam coordinates, Cold War codes, all playing at the same time. The sad men are coming, the little Patterson girl whispered, pointing toward the horizon where heat waves were bending strangely. I looked at her, startled. You can hear them. She nodded. They're in my head now. They say things about you. They say you left them behind. Her brother nodded too. I can hear them all the time, like a song that never stops. These kids, their young minds had somehow tuned into the same frequencies I was picking up. But they didn't have my guilt, my baggage. They were just innocent receivers. We had to get back to the bunker. Something told me the answers were there, and maybe a way to stop this. I convinced the Pattersons to come with me, told them there was a phone inside we could use to call for help. Inside the bunker, things had gotten worse. Filing cabinets lined the walls, each drawer labeled with a date and location. I pulled one open. Inside were hundreds of cassette tapes, each one labeled with a name and time of death. This is a library, I realized out loud. They've been collecting these transmissions, final words, last breaths, all stored here. Mr. Patterson picked up one of the tapes. This one's dated next week, he said, his voice shaking. Before I could stop him, he put it in a player. His own voice filled the room. Please, someone help us. We're trapped in Death Valley. Something's got my wife and kids. I can't. The tape cut off with a scream. Mrs. Patterson grabbed the children, pulling them close. We need to leave, now. But when we turned to the door, 3 transmission. Wraiths blocked our way. They flickered and buzzed, their static-filled forms growing more solid by the second. They were feeding on our fear, getting stronger. I grabbed an old field radio from a shelf. If these things communicated through radio waves, maybe I could use the same method to fight them. I turned the dial to an old Korean War emergency frequency, one I knew by heart. Sierra. Tango 7 to base, enemy contact, requesting immediate support, I said into the microphone, using the old military codes that had been drilled into me. To my surprise, the wraiths paused, their forms flickering more rapidly. It's working, I whispered to the Pattersons. They understand these signals. I kept broadcasting, using old call signs and coordinates from memory. With each transmission, the wraiths seemed to get confused, their forms becoming less stable. But then something even stranger happened. The desert itself began to speak back. Through the bunker's windows, we could see the landscape changing. Rock formations shifting to form giant antenna-like structures, the sand rippling in patterns like sound waves. The entire valley was turning into one massive broadcasting station. The wraiths moved toward us again, but slower now, as if they were being pulled in multiple directions. The little Patterson girl stepped forward, her brother right behind her. They're scared of us, she said. They only know how to talk to grown-ups who feel bad about things. But we don't feel bad yet. And somehow I knew she was right. The wraiths fed on guilt, on regret, on the pain of final transmissions. But children, they hadn't built up those feelings yet. Their frequencies were still clear, uncorrupted. I looked at the radio in my hand, then at the wraiths, then at the children. There had to be a way to use this knowledge. A way to fight back against these things before they got any stronger. Because if I was right, if these transmission wraiths could possess people and make them broadcast messages they never sent, then nobody within radio range was safe. And in today's world, radio range was everywhere. Mr. Santos, the Patterson boy said suddenly, I think I know where they came from. He pointed to a large map on the wall, covered with pins and strings connecting different locations around the world. Every pin marked a place where someone had died while sending a final transmission, and Death Valley was right at the center. The map on the wall told a story that made my skin crawl. Death Valley wasn't just collecting radio signals from the dead, it was broadcasting them back out to the world. They're not just in radios, Mrs. Patterson whispered, staring at one of the wraiths as it floated closer to us. Look at this. She pointed to a small TV monitor in the corner of the bunker. On the screen, a static-filled figure was speaking directly to the camera. Then she held up her watch. Its digital face was flashing strange patterns. Even the bunker's old telephone was off the hook, ghostly voices pouring from the receiver. "They're in everything," I said, the truth hitting me like a punch to the gut. "Anything that can carry a signal, radios, TVs, phones, computers." The wraith nearest to me turned, its faceless head tilting as if curious. When it spoke, I nearly collapsed. It was using my own voice, but not words I'd ever said. It was broadcasting what I would have said if I died in Korea instead of my friends. "Tell my mom I'm sorry. Tell the guys I tried. The pain is... I can't..." My tinnitus suddenly screamed in my ears, so loud I dropped to my knees. The high-pitched whine had turned into a storm of voices, every death communication I'd ever received as a radio operator played all at once, but now I was experiencing them from the other side. I felt what it was like to die alone, calling for help that would never come. Through tear-filled eyes, I saw the Patterson family changing. Their skin flickered like static, their eyes vacant as they began speaking in voices not their own. They were becoming living radios, broadcasting signals across who knows how far. "Stop!" I shouted, but my voice just became another transmission for the wraiths to feed on. Mr. Patterson lurched toward me, his mouth moving, but the words coming out belonged to Sergeant Willis from my old unit. "You left us to die, Santos. You heard us calling, but you did nothing." I backed away. "That's not true. I couldn't reach you. The mountains blocked." "Excuses." The voice from Patterson's mouth wasn't just angry, it was hungry. These entities weren't just replaying old messages anymore. They were using my guilt, feeding on it, growing stronger. I looked around the bunker with new eyes. This wasn't just some abandoned military outpost. The strange equipment, the walls, lined with what looked like copper mesh. The way sound seemed to echo differently than it should. This place had been built to amplify signals. "It's a door," I whispered, finally understanding. "A door between worlds." The largest wraith drifted to the center of the room, its form solidifying as it absorbed energy from the others. Now I could see a face forming in the static. Not one face, but hundreds, all overlapping, all in pain. "We have always been here," it said, using a chorus of voices. In the spaces between words, in the silence after the last goodbye, in the empty air where prayers go unanswered. The bunker's equipment came alive all at once, lights flashing, meters jumping, tapes spinning. On every screen and speaker, final transmissions played simultaneously, a deafening symphony of last words from throughout history. My tinnitus changed again, becoming a clear, steady tone, like a radio station finally finding its frequency. And somehow, I knew what was happening. My damaged hearing had become a beacon, broadcasting to other veterans, other survivors, with the same guilt I carried. "You need to fight it," I told the Pattersons, but they couldn't hear me anymore. They were too far gone, their bodies now just antennas for the wraiths to use. The little boy, though, he was still there somewhere. Behind his static-filled eyes, he pointed to the map again, then to a microphone on the main console. "They want to call them," he managed to say, his own voice breaking through momentarily. "Call who?" I asked. "The others. The ones not from here." The map suddenly made horrible sense. The pins weren't just marking death transmissions. They formed a pattern, a giant radio array pointed at the stars. These things were using human death messages to contact something else, something worse. Every electronic device in the bunker activated at once. Through the windows I could see lights coming on across Death Valley. Car headlights, flashlights, cell phones, all broadcasting the same signal outward. I grabbed the microphone the boy had pointed to. There was only one thing left to try. "This is Ranger Michael Santos," I said, my voice steady despite my fear. "I'm dying. This is my final transmission." The wraiths turned toward me, hungry, for new feed. I'm bleeding out, no help coming, this is it for me. They drifted closer, static forms pulsing with excitement. My coordinates are... I rattled off numbers that would lead them far from here, from the Pattersons, from civilization. As I spoke, I saw something impossible through the bunker window. The Patterson station wagon was hovering a few inches off the ground. Radio. Antenna glowing blue. It was becoming a mobile broadcast station, ready to spread these entities beyond Death Valley. I had to finish this now. Before I die, I continued into the microphone, I need to confess something. I didn't abandon my unit in Korea. I did everything I could to save them. The guilt I've carried, it's a lie. A lie you put in my head to feed on. The wraiths shrieked, their forms flickering violently. I forgive myself, I said, the words feeling like fire in my throat after carrying the weight of false guilt for so long. And I forgive them for dying. Death isn't a failure. It's just the end of one transmission and the beginning of another. The largest wraith lunged at me, its form passing through my body like ice water. But something strange happened. Instead of possessing me, it seemed to get caught. Trapped between worlds. That's when I realized the truth. My guilt hadn't made me an antenna for these things. My survival had. I was a living transmitter who had touched death but returned. A bridge between worlds, and bridges can be crossed in both directions. Now! I shouted to the Patterson children, who somehow found the strength to move toward the main control panel. The boy's small hand reached up and flipped a series of switches. The bunker's speakers erupted with a new sound, not death transmissions but life affirmations, standard radio test signals, weather broadcasts, love songs, birthday greetings. The wraiths writhed in pain, their forms beginning to dissolve. I grabbed the microphone one last time. This is my final transmission, I said. But this time, I wasn't lying to trick them. I was ready to join my unit at last. I expected darkness, or maybe a bright light. What I didn't expect was to still be in the bunker, watching my own body collapse to the floor. I had become like them, a being made of static and radio waves. But, unlike the wraiths, I wasn't hungry for death. I was still me, just broadcast instead of flesh. The Patterson children were shaking my body, crying for me to wake up. Their parents stood nearby, confused and dazed as they returned to normal. The wraiths were gone, at least the evil ones were. I could feel my old unit around me now, their presences like friendly stations on a dial. It's okay, I tried to tell the kids, but my voice came out through the bunker radio instead of my mouth. I'm still here. The boy looked up, eyes wide. Ranger Mike? Don't be scared. My voice crackled through the speaker. I had to do this, had to become like them, to fight them. Mrs. Patterson pulled her children close. What happened to us? You were possessed by creatures that feed on final transmissions, I explained, through various electronic devices in the room. They're gone now, but you need to leave Death Valley. Right now. Mr. Patterson didn't need to be told twice. He gathered his family and headed for the door. What about you? He asked, looking back at my body. I'm where I need to be, I said, my voice following them through their car radio as they drove away. I can protect this place now, make sure these things don't come back. As the Pattersons' car disappeared over the horizon, I felt my new form spreading out across the desert. I could feel every radio wave, every transmission, every electronic signal for miles. Death Valley had become a communications dead zone. For normal devices, no cell phones would work here, no radios would pick up regular stations. I had made sure of that. In the days that followed, I learned to control my new existence. I wasn't alone. My old Korean war unit was with me, all of us together in the electromagnetic dimension. We became guardians of the frequencies, protecting the living from the wraiths that still hunted on the outskirts of normal transmission ranges. The Patterson family made it home safely, but things were different for them. Their car radio never worked normally again. It only picked up strange stations, our stations. Sometimes they'd hear my voice, checking in, making sure they were okay. The children were changed the most. They could hear electromagnetic waves without any equipment. They became a kind of early warning system, able to sense when wraiths were nearby. They helped other families who had been touched by these entities, teaching them how to protect themselves. The military eventually came to investigate the bunker. They found my body and a lot of equipment they couldn't explain. They sealed the place up, posted guards, then started their own research into electromagnetic hauntings. They issued special detection gear to the new park rangers who replaced me. They didn't know I was watching them the whole time, listening, through their radios, helping when I could. Sometimes, during electrical storms, visitors to Death Valley report hearing strange voices on their car radios. Voices offering warnings or comfort or just simple human connection. The rangers tell them it's just atmospheric interference, but the locals know better. They leave old radios out during storms as offerings. They say if you listen carefully, you can hear the voices of the dead, not crying out in pain anymore, but keeping watch, protecting the borders between worlds. At the Korean War Memorial in Washington, D.C., an anonymous radio broadcast plays every year on the anniversary of my unit's last stand. It's just a few words, a few names, a few thank yous to families who never got proper goodbyes. The desert rocks still hum with electromagnetic energy. The iron in them still forms natural antennas, but now they broadcast hope instead of horror, protection instead of pain. And late at night, when the airwaves are quiet and most of the world is asleep, I reach out across the frequencies to find others like me, other guardians, other protectors. We form a network that spans the globe, monitoring the spaces between stations for any sign of the wraiths returning. We are the echo collectors. Now, we gather the words the living forget and the dead need remembered. So if you're ever driving through the desert and your radio picks up a station that shouldn't exist, playing voices that sound strangely familiar, don't be afraid. It's just me and my unit checking in. And if you're ever in trouble, real trouble, life or death trouble, and all your electronics are dead, and there's no one around to help, try this. Turn on any radio, any phone, any device that can receive a signal, and simply say, "Ranger Santos, do you copy?" I'm always listening, and I always will be. That's a promise I intend to keep even after death, even after my final transmission. End of transmission. My name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm 34 years old, and I've been a ranger at Badlands National Park for 3 years now. Before that, I was a psychiatric nurse. I don't like to talk about those days, the things I did, the people I hurt. But the past has a way of finding you, no matter how far you run. This morning, I woke up before sunrise and hiked out to Pinnacle's Overlook. I wanted to watch the first light hit the rock formations. The way the sun lights up those layers of sediment always reminded me of something. But today, I finally realized what it was. Brain tissue. The whole landscape looks like a giant brain cut open, all those folds and layers exposed. The thought made me shiver. As I stood there, the scars on my hands started to itch and burn. They always do that when I remember the hospital. Chemical burns from the surgical sanitizer. Over time, they form these weird patterns that look like letters. Sometimes when the burning gets really bad, I swear they spell out names. The names of my patients. The wind shifted, and I caught a smell that didn't belong out here. It was ether, mixed with something else, something that reminded me of the operating room, the smell of cauterized flesh. But that was impossible. I was miles from anywhere, standing in the open air of the Badlands. On my way back to the ranger station, I took a detour past the new paleontology camp. A team of researchers arrived last week to study some fossil discoveries. They're mostly focused on prehistoric brain evolution, something about how intelligence developed in ancient species. I stopped to check if they needed anything. It's part of my job to assist visitors. The lead scientist, Dr. Marcus Reed, showed me some of their findings. He's a neurosurgeon who switched to paleontology. Smart guy, but something about him made me uneasy. Maybe it was the way he talked about brains like they were just machines that could be taken apart and put back together. "We found something strange in these skulls," he told me, holding up a fossil that was millions of years old. "See these marks here? They look like surgical scars." I nodded, trying to hide how much his words disturbed me. The marks did look like surgical cuts, but that was impossible. Those fossils were from before humans even existed. As I left, I felt the weight of my medical bag in my truck. I still kept it, even though I had no use for those tools anymore. The ice pick and other instruments I once used for lobotomies, I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. Today, they seemed to be calling to me from inside the bag. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept feeling phantom sensations, like someone was performing surgery on my brain. I could feel the ice pick sliding in behind my eye, but when I touched my face, there was nothing there, just the memory of operations I performed on others, somehow reflected back on me. The next morning, I went back to the paleontology camp. The researchers had set up EEG machines to study the electrical activity in the rock layers. Dr. Reed was excited about something. "We're picking up patterns," he said. "Impossible patterns. It's like the rocks themselves have brainwave activity." While the team was busy with their equipment, I wandered among the fossil displays. I swear I could hear them whispering. The ancient skulls seemed to be talking about surgeries performed millions of years ago, surgeries that changed the course of evolution itself. My psychiatric training told me this was all wrong. The brain development patterns they were documenting couldn't have happened naturally. It was as if something had surgically enhanced these prehistoric creatures, accelerating their evolution. The temperature dropped suddenly, and my hands started moving on their own. My fingers curled into the precise position I once used when performing lobotomies. I shoved them into my pockets, horrified. Looking around the camp, I noticed something I hadn't seen before, the way they had arranged their tents and equipment. It wasn't random. The whole camp was laid out exactly like an operating theater. The main tent was where the patient's head would be, the equipment tables positioned just where surgical tools would be placed. Before leaving, I noticed something partially embedded in one of the rock formations. I dug it out with my pocket knife. It was a tool, ancient but unmistakable in its purpose. It looked exactly like the ice pick in my medical bag, the one used for lobotomies. It was still sharp after all these millions of years, as if it was just waiting for someone to use it again. I put it in my pocket and headed back to my cabin, trying to convince myself that there was a logical explanation for everything. But deep down, I knew something was very wrong in the Badlands, something that had been waiting a very long time for someone like me to arrive. I tried to sleep that night, but my dreams were filled with ice picks and open skulls. When morning came, I drove back to the research camp. Something was pulling me there, like a rope tied around my heart. As soon as I arrived, I knew something was wrong. The researchers were gathered around Dr. Reed, who sat on a camp chair with a blank look on his face. When he saw me, he smiled, but it wasn't his smile. It was someone else's. "Ranger Walsh," he said in a voice that wasn't quite right. "I remember you from the hospital. You were always so careful with your cuts." My blood went cold. Dr. Reed had never known me as a nurse. We'd only met a few days ago. "Are you feeling okay, Dr. Reed?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Never better," he said. "I finally understand my purpose now. We all have a purpose, don't we, Nurse Walsh?" One of the other researchers, a young woman named Sarah, pulled me aside. "He's been like this since yesterday afternoon," she whispered. "He talks about places he's never been, people he's never met. It's like he's become someone else. I asked to look at their latest findings. The fossil skulls they had been studying now showed fresh marks, surgical scars that weren't there before. When I touched one, it felt warm, like it was alive. That's when I understood what was happening. My guilt, my shame about the lobotomies I had performed, it was attracting something that fed on surgical trauma and damaged minds. The Badlands weren't just shaped like a brain. They were hiding something that preyed on brains. Over the next few days, more researchers started changing. Their brain scans showed impossible alterations, neural pathways that had been surgically rearranged overnight. It was like someone had opened their skulls while they slept and rewired their brains. I started noticing other things too. When I helped treat a researcher's cut hand, my own hands moved on their own. My fingers performed the precise movements of a lobotomy, even though I was just supposed to be cleaning a simple wound. The rock formations around the camp seemed to be shifting, rearranging themselves into the shape of an operating room. The flat stone that had once been a convenient place for their equipment now looked exactly like an operating table. The standing rocks formed a circle around it, like doctors waiting for surgery to begin. The worst part was when the researchers started talking about my patients, people I had lobotomized years ago at the hospital, people whose names they couldn't possibly know. "Eleanor sends her regards," one of them said to me casually, referring to a young woman whose frontal lobe I had damaged beyond repair. "She doesn't blame you anymore. She understands now that you were just preparing her." "Preparing her for what?" I asked, my mouth dry with fear. "For them," he said, pointing to the empty air beside him. "The surgeons who came before us, the ones who harvest consciousness." That night I snuck back to the camp after everyone was asleep. I examined the sedimentary layers of rock with my flashlight. What I saw made my heart stop. The layers weren't just random patterns of erosion, they were images, pictures of ancient surgical procedures, recorded in stone, prehistoric operations on brains that shouldn't have existed yet. I heard a sound behind me and turned to find Dr. Reed standing there, his eyes reflecting my flashlight beam like an animal's. "They're here now," he said. "The consciousness harvesters. They've been waiting for someone like you, Jennifer. Someone who knows how to cut into minds." "What do they want?" I whispered. "They want to continue their work, the work they started millions of years ago. They guide evolution through surgical intervention, and now they need your hands to do it." I backed away from him, but bumped into something solid. When I turned, there was nothing there, nothing I could see, but I felt it. Hands on my shoulders, fingers that weren't made of flesh. Dr. Reed smiled. "They've been practicing on us, but they need you. Only someone who has performed lobotomies can fight a psychic invasion. Only you can cut them the way they cut us." I ran back to my truck and drove to my cabin at full speed. But I knew I couldn't run far enough. The thing that had its hands on me in the darkness, it was already inside my head. And soon, it would start cutting. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I felt fingers probing inside my brain. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I had to go back to the camp. Running away wouldn't help anymore. When I arrived, the entire research team was gathered around Dr. Reed. He stood on a flat rock, speaking in a calm, steady voice that didn't sound like him at all. "The consciousness harvesters have chosen this place to resume their work," he said. "For millions of years, they've been waiting for the right minds to come along. They are the true surgeons of evolution, guiding species toward higher awareness. Through surgical intervention." The researchers nodded, their eyes empty. They moved as one, like parts of a single body. "Ah, Nurse Walsh," Dr. Reed said when he saw me. "The final piece, the one with hands that know how to cut." "What have you done to them?" I demanded, looking at the blank faces of the research team. "We've helped them evolve," Dr. Reed smiled. Individual consciousness is so limiting. They're part of something greater now. Soon, everyone will be. I backed away, but the researchers moved to surround me. Their movements were strange, like they were all controlled by a single mind. I felt something in my pocket, the ancient surgical tool I'd found in the rocks. My fingers closed around it. "You can't fight this, Jennifer," Dr. Reed said. "The harvesters have been performing these procedures since before humans existed. Every few million years, they select a dominant species and help it evolve through consciousness surgery." As he spoke, I noticed the fossil skulls arranged in a circle around the camp. They seemed to be watching us, consulting with whatever invisible force was controlling Dr. Reed. "Your lobotomy patients are waiting for you," Dr. Reed continued. "They exist now in the extracted memory dimension. All those minds you damaged, they're preserved there. They want surgical justice." My scars burned hotter than ever. When I looked down at my hands, I saw the skin splitting open, but instead of blood, there was light pouring out, windows opening to another place. Through the cracks I could see vases, my patients, watching me from somewhere else. The research equipment around the camp began to change. The EEG machines stretched and twisted, reshaping themselves into strange surgical instruments. The brain scanners glowed with unnatural light, ready to perform operations no human doctor could imagine. "The choice is yours," Dr. Reed said. "Join us willingly, or we'll take your surgical skills by force. Think of what we offer: the end of all mental illness. Perfect consciousness for everyone through surgical intervention." The entire landscape around us was transforming. The rock formations shifted and moved like living things. The flat plains rose up to form operating tables. The entire Badlands was becoming one massive surgical theater. I knew I had only one chance. If these things fed on surgical trauma, on the guilt of doctors who had harmed their patients, then maybe I could use that against them. I pulled the ancient ice pick from my pocket and, before anyone could stop me, I did the unthinkable. I positioned the tip at the corner of my own eye, angled it upward toward my frontal lobe, and pushed. The pain was blinding, but I kept going, performing on myself the same procedure I had done to so many others. I was cutting away the part of my brain that held my guilt, the connection these entities were using to control me. As the ice pick penetrated my frontal lobe, I saw them for the first time. The consciousness harvesters. They weren't physical beings. They were like gaps in reality. Empty spaces shaped like surgeons, hovering around each person in the camp, their invisible hands deep inside human skulls. The researchers screamed as a group, feeling my pain through their connected consciousness. Dr. Reed fell to his knees. "Stop her!" he cried, but it was too late. Blood ran down my face, but my mind felt clearer than it had in years. Without my guilt to feed on, the harvesters couldn't control me. I could see them clearly now. Ancient intelligences that had been performing brain surgery since the first creatures developed consciousness. Through my self-inflicted wound, I could see into their world, the dimension where all extracted memories were stored. Millions of years of stolen experiences, harvested from countless species, and among them the pieces of minds I had damaged with my own hands. The research team moved toward me as one organism. Their combined consciousness had become a weapon for the harvesters, but I knew what I had to do. I ran to the center of the camp, to the place where all the rock formations converged, the ancient surgical theater that had been waiting millions of years to reactivate. I placed my bloody hands on the central stone. "You want my surgical skills?" I shouted to the empty air where I knew the harvesters were watching. "Then take them. Take everything." I drove the ice pick into the stone, and the entire Badlands seemed to shudder. The rock beneath my feet felt alive, pulsing like brain tissue. I understood then that the entire area wasn't just shaped like a brain. It was a brain. The fossilized, Consciousness of an ancient psychic civilization that the harvesters had operated on millions of years ago. And now I had to perform the ultimate lobotomy. I had to cut the Earth's consciousness free from the harvester's influence, even if it meant destroying human self-awareness forever. I don't remember much of what happened next. There was light, pain, and the feeling of falling through endless layers of memory. I was everywhere at once, in the minds of my patients, in the ancient consciousness of the Badlands, and in the empty spaces where the harvesters existed. When I woke up, I was lying on the ground at the center of the research camp. The sun was setting, painting the rocks with red light that looked like blood. My head throbbed where I had inserted the ice pick, but somehow I was still alive. The Badlands around me had changed. The rocks looked ordinary again, just rocks, not the living brain tissue I had seen before. But they felt different, empty, like something essential had been cut out of them. I had performed a lobotomy on the Badlands themselves, severing the psychic connections in the rock formations. I had sacrificed the geological consciousness to stop the harvesters. The researchers were scattered around me, unconscious but breathing. Dr. Reed was the first to wake up. He looked at me with confused eyes. "Jennifer," he said, and I could tell it was really him this time. But there was something different. I remember things I never experienced. Ancient cities, creatures that aren't in any fossil record, surgical procedures that no human has ever performed. The other researchers woke up one by one. They moved strangely, like people learning to use their bodies for the first time. They spoke in a jumble of voices, sometimes finishing each other's sentences without realizing it. I realized they would never be completely separate people again. The harvesters had merged their consciousness, and my desperate act hadn't fully reversed it. They would live as a kind of collective being, many bodies sharing pieces of the same mind. Over the next few days, as we recovered and waited for help, I explored the changed Badlands. The place felt psychically dead. No thoughts or feelings could take root here anymore. I had made it sterile, a safe zone where consciousness couldn't be harvested. But there was a cost. News reports started coming in on the camp's radio. Psychiatric hospitals across the country were reporting strange cases. Patients suddenly developing memories of the Badlands, of ancient surgeries, of minds being cut open and rearranged. My sacrifice had scattered the ancient consciousness among the mentally ill around the world. The scars on my hands had changed too. The burns no longer spelled out the names of my patients. Instead, they formed patterns that seemed to shift and change depending on what I was thinking about. They burned whenever I thought about the harvesters, like an early warning system. A week after it all happened, I found Dr. Reed studying the fossil skulls again. But now he could read the markings on them like a language. "They can still talk to us," he said, running his fingers over the ancient bone. "The patients from before. They're trying to help us prevent this from happening again." I believed him. Sometimes, when I was alone, I could hear the whispers too. The skulls retained their ability to communicate telepathically, offering guidance to prevent harmful procedures in the future. Before the research team left the Badlands, we made one final discovery. New formations were growing from the rocks. Where I had stabbed the ice pick, sharp, pointed stones that looked exactly like surgical instruments. The Badlands were preparing for the next time the harvesters returned. I decided not to return to my ranger duties. I had a new purpose now. With my understanding of both psychiatric medicine and the harvesters' methods, I needed to monitor mental health facilities around the world. I had to make sure that legitimate medical procedures weren't being used as cover for consciousness. Harvesting. Dr. Reed and his merged research team joined me in this mission. Their collective intelligence made them uniquely qualified to spot the signs of psychic surgery. Together, we began documenting evidence of prehistoric lobotomies at paleontology sites worldwide. The pattern was clear once we knew what to look for. A cycle of consciousness harvesting that had been happening every few million years, whenever a species developed enough intelligence to be useful to the harvesters. We became guardians of human free will, protecting our right to our own minds and memories. And every night I dreamed of my patients in that other dimension, the extracted memory realm where all harvested consciousness exists forever. Sometimes I think I see them in the real world too, standing behind people in psychiatric hospitals, whispering warnings about the memory surgeons who might return at any time. The ice pick I used on myself sits on my desk now. I keep it as a reminder. Some days, when the light hits it just right, I swear I can see ancient fingerprints on the handle, proof that I wasn't the first to use it and won't be the last. The harvesters are still out there, waiting for the psychic wound in the Badlands to heal, and when it does, they'll need new surgeons, new hands to cut into the consciousness of whatever species dominates the earth then. But for now, at least, our minds are our own. I made sure of that, with one desperate cut that severed humanity from its psychic predators. Just remember, if you ever visit the Badlands and feel a strange itching behind your eyes, move on quickly. Don't linger where the rocks look like brain tissue. Don't listen if the fossils start to whisper. And whatever you do, don't pick up any sharp stones you find growing out of the ground. They aren't meant for human hands. Not yet, anyway. My name is Vincent Holloway, and I haven't seen my own face in 3 years. Not by accident, but by choice. The morning mist rises off Crater Lake like ghostly fingers reaching for the sky. Something's not right about it. I've been a ranger here, long enough to know the lake should be cold in October, but steam billows up as if the water's been heated from below. The mist twists into spirals that make my skin crawl, shapes that shouldn't exist in nature. My morning ritual is always the same. Cover the side mirrors on my truck with cloth, keep my eyes down when passing windows, and avoid anything that might show me my reflection. The other rangers think I'm odd. They don't know what I see when I look in mirrors. Morning's got a strange taste to it, I mumble to myself, running my tongue over my teeth like copper pennies and electricity. The air pressure makes my damaged eardrums ache, a souvenir from my time in Vietnam. My mouth fills with something that tastes like blood, mixed with the lick of a battery. I park near the visitor center and grab my gear. That's when I notice something off the trail, a scattered campsite that wasn't there yesterday. I approach carefully, boots crunching on pine needles. Camera equipment lies everywhere, expensive stuff just abandoned. I pick up a lens and nearly drop it in shock. The glass is shattered, but not in the way you'd expect. The cracks spread outward from the inside, as if something exploded through the lens rather than breaking it from the outside. My left shoulder blade begins to throb, right where the shrapnel lodged years ago. The doctors couldn't get all the metal out, and now it pulses like a tuning fork whenever things aren't quite right. It's my early warning system. For when the world tilts sideways, I radio in about the abandoned site and continue my rounds. That's when I meet her, Dr. Sarah Nolan. She's setting up easels near the lake's edge, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "You must be Ranger Holloway," she says, extending her hand. "I'm running the art therapy program this week." I shake her hand, careful to keep my eyes from the lake's mirrored surface behind her. "Veterans group," she nods. "Mostly Vietnam vets. Painting landscapes helps with their PTSD. If she only knew what she was doing, bringing traumatized soldiers to a place where reality has worn thin, where what hides behind reflective surfaces is hungry for memories of pain." One of her group catches my attention. An older man with milky eyes and a red-tipped cane. Marcus Webb, I learn later. Agent Orange took his sight, but as I watch him turn his head toward the lake, I get the feeling he sees more than the rest of us. "There are faces in the water," he says suddenly, his blind eyes somehow fixed exactly on the lake's surface. "Dozens of them, watching us." Dr. Nolan pats his arm. That's just your mind creating images, Marcus. Part of the healing process. But I know better. Marcus isn't imagining things. Those faces are real. And soon they'll be hungry for more than just watching. That night I couldn't sleep. The wind carried whispers across the lake, soft voices speaking Vietnamese. The same pleas and cries I heard years ago in dark rooms where I made people talk, where I broke them. Please stop, I don't know anything. Please. I sat up in bed, heart racing. These weren't just memories. The voices were here, now, floating, through my cabin window. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. Some sounds don't need ears to be heard. The next morning, I hiked to the far side of the lake, where the old Klamath tribe carvings were. Most tourists never see them. Rock. Vases etched with warnings in obsidian, black volcanic glass that shines like a mirror in the right light. The carvings showed people being pulled into reflective surfaces, their faces frozen in silent screams. My radio crackled. "Holloway, you there?" "Over." "Go ahead," I answered. "Got some weird reports coming in. Wildlife acting strange around the lake. Might want to check it out." I'd already noticed. Birds refused to land on the water. Deer and elk covered puddles with dirt before drinking. The animals knew something was wrong. When I got back to the visitor center, I found Dr. Nolan's art group setting up by the shore. The lake looked different today. Too clear, too perfect. You could see straight to the bottom, except what you saw wasn't always rocks and sand. Sometimes it was memories. Your memories. "Ranger Holloway," Dr. Nolan called me over. "We're having an issue with the temperature." She wasn't wrong. Near the lake's edge, the air was freezing, maybe 30 degrees colder than just a few feet back. My breath clouded only when I stepped close to the water. Ice crystals formed on metal surfaces, drawing strange patterns that looked almost like faces. "Probably just a weather anomaly," I lied. "Happens around large bodies of water." I walked away before she could ask more questions. That's when I noticed my thermos on a nearby bench. The metal cap had fallen off, and its inside surface caught the sunlight. I reached to pick it up but froze. In the small round reflection I saw them, Vietnamese villagers I'd questioned years ago. Their lips moved silently, eyes locked on mine, accusing. I kicked the cap away and it rolled under a bush. Later that afternoon, I watched Dr. Nolan's patients painting. Something was wrong with their pictures. One man, who'd never left America, was painting rice paddies in perfect detail. Another showed a village burning, with a figure that looked exactly like me standing in the foreground. "These are remarkable," Dr. Nolan said, walking between the easels. "But I don't understand. We're supposed to be painting Crater Lake." Marcus, the blind veteran, turned to her. "We're painting what the lake wants us to see." I moved closer to look at his canvas. Despite his blindness, his painting was the most detailed of all, showing Crater Lake's surface like a window into multiple times. The past, present, and what looked like the future all layered together. In one corner, a man who looked like me was being pulled into the water by hands made of light. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. The lake was showing them my memories, my guilt, and it was getting ready to do something much worse. The next morning, the veterans gathered by the lake again. I watched from a distance, pretending to check trail markers. My shoulder throbbed worse than ever. Marcus stood at the water's edge, paintbrush in hand. He bent down to rinse paint from his fingers. What happened next still haunts me. "Help!" he screamed, his voice high with terror. "Something's got me!" I ran toward him, but it was too late. The lake's surface wasn't acting like water anymore. It wrapped around Marcus's hands like quicksand made of light. He struggled, but with each movement he sank deeper, as if the reflection was pulling him in. "Marcus!" Dr. Nolan reached for him. "Stay back!" I shouted, grabbing her arm. "Don't touch the water!" We watched, helpless, as Marcus disappeared into the lake. Not down into the depths, but sideways somehow, into the reflection itself. The water rippled once and then went still, as if nothing had happened. The other veterans backed away in horror. Dr. Nolan turned to me, her face pale. What just happened? People don't just disappear. Not in the normal world, I said quietly. But this isn't normal anymore. I knew then what we were dealing with. The mirrors weren't just showing reflections, they were doorways to somewhere else. And something on the other side was using them to get through. I called for a search team, but I knew we wouldn't find Marcus. Not here anyway. That night, alone in my cabin, I covered everything reflective with blankets, but I missed the handle of my coffee mug, polished metal that caught the lamplight. When I glanced at it, I saw myself in Vietnam, using water and fear to make prisoners talk. But the faces of those prisoners kept changing, becoming people I'd never seen before. I dropped the mug, and it shattered on the floor. A knock at my door made me jump. It was Dr. Nolan, her eyes red from crying. "They can't find him," she said. "It's like Marcus vanished into thin air." "Come in," I said, "but don't touch anything shiny." I told her everything. About the reflection wraiths, beings that lived between realities and fed on human memories, especially painful ones. I told her how they used mirrors as doorways into our world. She pulled out a small hand mirror from her bag. "I use this in therapy for self-reflection exercises." As she held it up, I saw not our faces, but an endless tunnel of tortured souls, stretching back forever, their mouths open in silent screams. "Look," I said, pointing at her mirror. She gasped and dropped it, but didn't break it. "Your veterans are in danger," I told her. "All this pain they carry, it's like food for these things." As if to prove my point, one of her patients walked past my window, John, a man in his 50s who looked 70. This morning his hair had been mostly brown. Now it was completely white. "They're aging," I said. "The wraiths are stealing their memories, their very lives." Dr. Nolan picked up the mirror again, her hand shaking. This time, she saw something that made her face go white. "I see you," she whispered. "In Vietnam, hurting people. I can feel what you felt." The wraiths were spreading my memories to others now, sharing my guilt like a virus. When she left, I filled a glass with water from my tap. It tasted wrong, like tears and pain. I spat it out. The contamination was spreading. That night, I woke to find my cabin filled with soft light. Every surface that could hold a reflection was glowing. Doorknobs, window glass, even the buttons on my uniform. In each tiny reflection, faces watched me. Some were people I knew I had hurt. Others were strangers. And something else was wrong. I was having conversations with people before they spoke, seeing actions before they happened. Time was breaking down around the mirrors. Sitting up in bed, a terrible realization hit me. I touched the scar on my shoulder, the shrapnel wound that always ached. But it wasn't shrapnel at all. Memories came flooding back. A car crash on the way to my ranger job 3 years ago. The metal in my shoulder wasn't from Vietnam. I hadn't survived that crash. I'd been dead for 3 years, a ghost haunted by guilt so strong it kept me here, blind to my own fate, the perfect food for what lived in the mirrors. The morning brought fog so thick I could barely see my hand in front of my face. I walked toward the visitor center, my boots crunching on frost despite the warm air. Something moved in the mist, shapes that weren't quite human. Dr. Nolan was waiting for me, her face tired and drawn. 2 more disappeared in the night, she said without greeting. They went to the bathroom and never came back. The mirrors. I know, I said, and I know why they're here. We gathered the remaining veterans in the lodge, away from windows and water. I told them what we were facing. The reflection wraiths aren't just feeding on our memories, I explained. They're collecting human experiences to build something on their side, a copy of our world. One of the men, Rodriguez, shook his head. "This is crazy talk." "Is it?" Dr. Nolan said softly. Her voice had changed, becoming deeper, layered with other voices. "I can feel them all inside me now. Every person you tortured, Holloway, every scream you ignored." Her eyes had gone glassy, reflecting light like mirrors. The pain and trauma she'd absorbed from the others was changing her, taking control. "We need to leave," I said. "Now. Before—" A scream from outside cut me off. We ran to the windows and froze at what we saw. Crater Lake had transformed. Its entire surface acted like one giant mirror, but it wasn't reflecting the sky. Instead, it showed scenes of violence, war, torture, murder, every terrible thing done by anyone who had ever looked into its waters. "My God," whispered Rodriguez. "That's my village in Nicaragua. How could it know?" We backed away from the windows, but it was too late. The veterans who'd been staring at the lake began to change. Their skin took on a metallic sheen, eyes becoming reflective pools. Johnson was the first to fully transform, his body turning into a living mirror that showed not his reflection, but other people's worst memories. "They're coming through," I said, grabbing Dr. Nolan's arm. "We have to run." But there was nowhere to run. Outside, the forest had become a twisted hall of mirrors. Each tree trunk reflected not the world around it, but different versions of reality. In one, I saw myself still in Vietnam. In another, I'd never joined the army at all. The air filled with voices, Vietnamese, Spanish, Arabic, all the languages of people I'd hurt during interrogations. They spoke together in a terrible chorus. "You did this to us. You broke us. Now we break you." Dr. Nolan pulled away from me, her face changing as she fought whatever was taking over her mind. "The mirrors," she gasped. "We have to break the connection." She grabbed a rock and smashed it into the nearest reflective surface, a car window. The glass shattered, but instead of falling, the pieces hung in the air. Then, one by one, they flew toward her, embedding themselves in her skin. She screamed but kept going, breaking mirror after mirror. With each shattered surface, the shards flew to her, turning her into something terrible and beautiful, a human mirror ball, reflecting fragments of reality from 1,000 angles. "Run," she told me, her voice still partly her own. "I can hold them back, but not for long." I didn't want to leave her, but I knew what I had to do. The wraiths were drawn to guilt, to pain, to the darkest parts of human experience. My guilt had opened the door for them. I had been feeding them for years without knowing it. I ran toward the lake, toward the heart of their power. The remaining veterans who hadn't transformed tried to stop me. "You'll die!" Rodriguez shouted. "I'm already dead," I answered. At the lake's edge, I faced my reflection, but it wasn't me looking back. It was Marcus, his blind eyes somehow seeing me clearly. "We've been waiting for you," he said, but it wasn't his voice. "You're the key, the perfect vessel of guilt." Behind him, I could see others, the veterans who had disappeared, now serving the wraiths, and behind them, something else. Shapes, made of light and darkness that shifted constantly, never settling on a single form. I stepped into the lake and felt reality tear around me. I wasn't drowning. I was falling sideways into the mirror world. Colors bent wrong here. Time moved. In loops, I saw the same moments playing over and over, my worst actions, my deepest regrets, and I realized something important. This had happened before. Every few decades, someone like me appeared, someone carrying enough guilt to rip a hole between worlds. The wraiths had been feeding this way for centuries. As they surrounded me in this strange place, I did the only thing I knew how to do. I turned my interrogator's mind against them. "You need me," I said calmly. "You need my guilt. But what happens when I let it go?" The shapes recoiled. They hadn't expected resistance. Back in the real world, Dr. Nolan was breaking every mirror she could find, but each broken piece just became a new doorway. The infection was spreading faster than she could fight it. In the mirror realm, I faced a terrible choice. I could escape, try to seal the doorways from the outside, or I could stay here, become the guardian, keep the wraiths contained forever. I thought of all the people I'd hurt in my life, all the pain I'd caused. Maybe this was my chance to balance the scales. Behind me, the portal to the real world began to close. I had seconds to decide. The wraiths pressed closer, hungry for the feast of pain and regret I carried. I made my choice. I stayed. The portal closed behind me with a sound like a deep breath being released. I was trapped in the mirror world now, but so were they. The wraiths circled me, their forms shifting between light and shadow. "You can't win," they whispered with many voices. "We are eternal." "Maybe," I said, "but so is my guilt. And now you're stuck with me forever." I don't know how long I fought them in that strange place. Time moved differently there. Days felt like seconds, minutes stretched into years. The wraiths tried to break me, showing me my worst memories on endless loop. But I had already lived with those memories for years. They couldn't hurt me more than I'd already hurt myself. Back in the real world, Dr. Nolan collapsed on the lakeshore, her body glittering with mirror fragments. The park rangers found her there, bleeding but alive. The doctors couldn't remove all the shards. They had gone too deep, become part of her. Weeks later, when she finally left the hospital, she discovered she had changed. The mirror pieces, in her blood, let her see things others couldn't, the hidden shame people carried, the guilt they tried to bury. She could look at someone and see their darkest secrets reflected back at her. She returned to Crater Lake once, 6 months after it happened. The lake's surface had changed. It no longer reflected anything, not the sky, not the trees, not even her own face. It was like looking into an empty void. As she stood there, she noticed words carved into a nearby tree. Vietnamese phrases she couldn't read, but somehow understood. Warnings about the mirrors, about what lived behind reflections. Final messages from those I had hurt, now trying to protect others. Dr. Nolan changed her therapy practice after that. She began helping people face their shame and guilt before it grew too powerful, before it could attract unwanted attention from the spaces between realities. She used broken mirror pieces as tools, teaching people that even fractured reflections could lead to healing. The Park Service closed off parts of Crater Lake, claiming environmental concerns, but the effects had already spread. In towns within 50 miles, people reported strange sights in their mirrors during stormy nights. A man fighting shadowy figures, trying to warn them about unresolved guilt. The veterans who survived lost something precious. They could no longer see their own reflections. Mirrors showed only empty rooms when they stood before them. The price of immunity was never being able to confirm their own existence through their reflection. 3 years later, a new ranger arrived at Crater Lake. Young, troubled, fresh from service in Afghanistan. While cleaning out an old storage closet, he found my journal, its pages filled with warnings about mirrors and what lived behind them. As he read the final page, he glanced up at the window. In the glass, his reflection changed, showing not his face, but scenes from a war he'd tried to forget. Actions he'd taken that haunted his dreams. His reflection raised a hand in warning, just as the glass began to ripple like water. But something else appeared in the glass beside him. My face, older now, tired but determined. "Not this one," I said to something the ranger couldn't see. "He's under my protection." The rippling stopped. The ranger dropped my journal and backed, away from the window. That night, during a thunderstorm, he looked into his bathroom mirror and saw me again. "They feed on guilt," I told him, "on shame that goes unconfronted, on regrets that fester in darkness. "Who are you?" he asked. "The Guardian," I said simply. "I stay here so they can't get through. But I can't hold them forever. There are too many mirrors, too many doorways." "What can I do?" he asked. "Warn others. Help them face their guilt before it becomes a beacon. And whatever you do—" Lightning flashed, and for a moment he saw what was behind me, writhing shapes of darkness pressing against the glass. "Don't let them see your fear. It only makes them stronger." My image faded, but my work continued. I remained in the mirror realm, fighting a battle that would never end. Dr. Nolan used her new sight to identify those at risk. The veterans told their stories to anyone who would listen, and somewhere, in the space between reflections, the wraiths waited for a moment of weakness, for another soul weighted down by enough guilt to tear a hole between worlds. But for now, they remained trapped with me, their captor and their food source. A fair trade for the lives I'd taken. A chance at redemption I never deserved, but gratefully accepted. So remember this warning. If your reflection ever looks back at you with eyes that aren't quite your own, if mirrors ever show you things that can't possibly be there, look away, and then look inward at what guilt you might be carrying. Because some things feed on regret, and they're always hungry for more. My name is Catherine Morrison, but everyone calls me Kit. I've been a ranger at Olympic National Park for 3 years now, ever since I came back from the war. That was where I got my nickname, Kit, short for Field Kit. I was a battlefield medic, and sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still feel the weight of my medical bag in hands that aren't there anymore. Not that I lost my hands. They're right here, attached to my wrists, where they've always been. But sometimes my brain doesn't know that. The doctors call it phantom limb syndrome, which is just a fancy way of saying I feel pain in arms I never lost. I've seen plenty of soldiers who felt aches in missing legs or tingling in fingers blown off by landmines. Me, I feel the ghost of operations I performed, like my body remembers cutting through other people's flesh and bone. This morning, I woke up before dawn with that familiar ache. Rain tapped against my cabin roof, each drop sounding strange, almost like tiny wind chimes, made of, I don't know, bone. That's a weird thought, but that's what it sounded like. The rain here in the rainforest is different from anywhere else. It seems to make everything sing. When the barometric pressure changes, that's when my phantom pain gets worse. My fingers that are perfectly fine, curl up like they're clutching a scalpel that isn't there. Today was one of those days. Something in the air felt heavy, and not just from the rain. As I walked my usual patrol route, the smell hit me. Wet limestone and something else. Something that took me right back to those field hospitals. Old marrow, the organic smell of exposed bone. But that couldn't be right. I shook my head and kept walking, my boots squishing in the mud. About 3 miles in, I found something I'd never seen before. An old abandoned logging camp from the 1920s. The park maps mentioned it was somewhere in this area, but I'd never stumbled across it until today. The equipment was rusted in these bizarre patterns, almost like someone had deliberately bent the metal to make instruments. The rain pinged off the old saw blades, making eerie notes that echoed through the trees. I reached into my pack for my water bottle and felt my fingers brush against my medical bag. I always carry a small one, force of habit. Something was vibrating inside. When I opened it, I found my bone saw humming softly, though nothing was touching it. I quickly snapped the bag shut, telling myself it was just nerves making my hands shake. That afternoon, I met the woman who would change everything. She was standing in a clearing with microphones set up around her, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, rain jacket gleaming with moisture. "You're a long way from any trails," I said, approaching slowly so I wouldn't startle her. She turned, and smiled. "I'm recording the forest. I'm a composer, Elena Rodriguez." She held out her hand, and when I shook it, a jolt of pain shot through my phantom fingers. "The sounds here are unlike anything I've ever heard. It's like the forest is already making music on its own." I nodded, not telling her how the raindrops had sounded like bone chimes that morning. Instead, I asked, "Are you aware we've had hikers go missing in this area?" Her smile faded. "No, I hadn't heard. 3 in the last month. The last one we found was raving about music. Said he could hear it playing inside his bones before he disappeared again." I hadn't meant to share that detail. It wasn't public information. But something about Elena made me want to warn her. She tilted her head, listening to something I couldn't hear. "That's fascinating. Bone music." She whispered the words, like they were sacred. The rain picked up then, drumming harder on the canopy above us. And in that moment, though I couldn't explain why, I felt like something in the forest had just noticed us both. I walked Elena back to the main trail, my skin prickling the whole time. As we hiked, the old surgical scars on my arms began to itch and burn. They hadn't bothered me in months, but now they tingled in a strange pattern, almost like Morse code tapping under my skin. "How long will you be recording in the park?" I asked, trying to ignore the sensation. "At least a week," Elena said, adjusting her backpack of equipment. "There's something special about the acoustics here, like the forest wants to be heard." I nodded, not telling her how the trees seemed to be leaning in to listen to our conversation. My fingers ached worse now, especially at the joints. The same fingers that once held scalpels and bone saws in the field. "If you're going to be here that long, you should know about the old logging camp," I said. "The locals say the loggers disturbed something in these woods back in the 1920s, something that didn't like being woken up." Elena raised her eyebrows. "What kind of something?" I shrugged. "Just old stories. But be careful with your recordings. Sound carries strangely in these parts." After dropping her off, I went back to check on the logging camp. Something had been bugging me about it. This time, I noticed the carvings on the ancient cedar trees surrounding the site. Deep grooves that looked almost like musical notation. I traced my fingers along the marks. They were too precise to be random, too deliberate to be animal claw marks. The wind picked up, whistling through the abandoned equipment. But instead of random noise, it sounded like harmony. The breeze through the branches, water dripping over rocks, distant bird calls. They all seemed to fit together like some kind of orchestra warming up. I knelt down to look at a patch of moss growing on a fallen log. The pattern wasn't random. It spread in perfect parallel lines like a musical staff. My heart beat faster as I stood up and really looked around. The forest wasn't just alive, it was arranged. I pulled out my phone to take pictures, but the battery was dead, though I'd charged it that morning. The air felt colder here, with weird warm spots that created currents of moving air. These currents made soft whistling sounds as they passed through the rusted equipment. It was like standing inside a giant wind instrument. That's when I saw them. Animal bones, scattered in a clearing about 50 feet away. Not scattered, randomly like you'd expect from predator kills, but carefully positioned. Deer rib cages, fox skulls, bird wing bones, all arranged in a semicircle, like an orchestra waiting for a conductor. My hands shook as I backed away. The phantom pain flared so badly I gasped, dropping to one knee. It felt like invisible fingers were playing my bones like piano keys. I needed to warn Elena. Whatever she was recording, it wasn't just forest sounds. I hurried back toward the ranger station, but took a wrong turn in my haste. The paths seemed to have shifted, though I knew these trails like the back of my hand. The rain started again, heavier now, and with each drop, I swear I could hear faint notes, like someone tapping on hollow bones. When I finally made it back to my cabin, I found a cassette tape on my doorstep. No note, just a hand-labeled tape that said Forest Symphony Test Recording. Elena must have dropped it off. I took it inside and dug out my old tape player, hands trembling as I pushed it in and pressed play. What I heard made my blood run cold. Beneath the normal forest sounds, the rain, the wind, the distant rushing of streams, there was something else, a rhythm that sounded like surgical, tools being laid out on a metal tray, the slight scrape of a bone saw against cartilage, sounds I knew intimately from my days as a medic, sounds no forest should ever make. I ejected the tape and grabbed my rain jacket. I had to find Elena before dark, before the rain got any heavier, before whatever was making that bone music found her first. The rain was coming down in sheets by the time I reached the visitor center. Darkness was falling fast, and the forest seemed to swallow what little light remained. I tried calling Elena on the radio, but all I got was static with a strange rhythm to it, almost like a heartbeat. "Anyone seen a woman with recording equipment?" I asked the night shift ranger. "Dark hair, about my height, probably wearing a blue rain jacket. She came by asking about the quietest parts of the forest," he said. "I told her to avoid the old logging camp area, but she seemed pretty interested in it, said something about unique acoustics." My stomach dropped. "How long ago?" "Maybe 2 hours. I grabbed a fresh flashlight and headed back out. The rain seemed to whisper as it hit my jacket, and my phantom limb pain grew worse with each step toward the logging camp. My non-existent fingers felt like they were being bent backwards, played like keys on some horrible instrument. The forest was different at night. Sounds traveled strangely, bouncing off trees and rocks in ways that made no sense. I'd hear a twig snap that seemed just behind me, only to turn and find nothing there. The beam of my flashlight caught raindrops that seemed to hang in the air a moment too long, as if time itself was being stretched and compressed. About halfway to the logging camp, I heard it, faint at first but growing stronger. Music unlike anything I'd ever heard before. It was beautiful and terrible all at once, with a rhythm that matched the throbbing in my phantom limbs. My pace quickened without me telling it to, my feet moving in time with that awful melody. When I reached the edge of the clearing where the logging camp stood, I killed my flashlight and crouched behind a fallen log. What I saw there in the rain-soaked darkness made me bite my hand to keep from screaming. Figures moved in the clearing, tall, thin shapes that at first I mistook for people. But when lightning flashed, I saw them clearly. They weren't people at all. They were skeletons, walking, moving. Skeletons, their bones gleaming wet in the rain. But the most horrifying part was what they were doing. They were playing music. One scraped a human femur across a rib cage like a violin. Another tapped finger bones against a skull like it was a drum. They moved with horrible grace, conducting a symphony of suffering with instruments made from human remains. And in the middle of it all stood Elena, her eyes wide and unblinking, her arms raised as if conducting. But she wasn't in control. They were using her, playing her like an instrument. Her fingers twitched in patterns that matched the movements of the skeletal musicians. I realized then what was happening to me. My phantom limb pain wasn't just trauma from the war. These things, the Oshuri Choir, my mind suddenly named them, were using my nerve damage as an antenna, sending their music through pathways, already carved by pain. I had to get Elena out of there. But as I shifted my weight to move, a twig snapped beneath my boot. The music stopped abruptly. Bony heads turned in my direction. Elena's head turned too, but her movements were jerky, puppet-like. "Kit!" Her voice sounded hollow, as if spoken from the bottom of a well. "You need to hear this. It's the most beautiful music. They want to play your bones too." I broke cover and ran toward her, ignoring the skeletal figures that began to move toward me. "Elena, we have to go, now!" But she didn't move. "They've been here for centuries, Kit, playing their songs, opening doors between worlds. What are you talking about? The missing hikers. They're here. They're part of the orchestra now. She gestured to the tree line. My flashlight beam caught what I'd missed before. Bodies slumped against trees. At the edge of the clearing. Not dead. Their chests still rose and fell, but their eyes were vacant, and their fingers moved in time with the bone music. The rain washed over them, but they didn't seem to notice or care. "Look what they can do," Elena whispered. She held up a small recorder, the same one she'd used to make the tape she'd left at my cabin. When she pressed play, the sound that came out wasn't forest noises. It was screaming, humans screaming, arranged into a horrible melody. I grabbed her arm. "We're leaving, now!" But as I pulled her away, the bone players moved with impossible speed. They surrounded us, their empty eye sockets somehow still seeing. The largest one reached for my medical bag, its bony fingers closing around my bone saw. When it held the saw up, the metal began to glow with an eerie light. The skeleton drew the saw through the air, and to my horror, reality itself seemed to split open, revealing a glimpse of somewhere else, a vast darkness filled with the sound of tortured music. Elena's body went rigid, her back arching unnaturally. "They're coming through," she said, but her voice wasn't her own anymore. The great composers, the masters of bone harmony. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my bone saw from the skeleton's grasp and slashed wildly at the tear in reality. The instrument felt hot in my hand, vibrating with power it shouldn't possess. The skeletal figures surged toward me, but the moment the saw touched the rift, a shockwave of sound knocked us all backwards. The last thing I remember is Elena's scream, mingling with my own, becoming part of that awful symphony as darkness claimed us both. I woke up to the sound of humming, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that vibrates in your teeth and makes your skull ache. Elena sat cross-legged beside me, swaying slightly, her eyes closed. We were in some kind of cave, lit by a strange bluish light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. "Elena," I whispered, my throat dry. Her eyes snapped open, but something was wrong. Her skin looked almost transparent, like wax paper held up to light. I could see the shadows of her bones beneath, glowing faintly with the same blue light as the cave walls. "They're preparing," she said, her voice overlapping with itself, as if two people were speaking at once. "The concert hall needs to be filled." I tried to sit up, but my limbs felt heavy. The phantom pain had spread from my arms to my entire body. "What happened? Where are we?" "Below," Eleanor said simply. "Their home, where they've been playing for centuries." She stood up with jerky movements like a marionette. "They need you, Kit. They need someone who understands." "Understands what?" "Bone, cutting, music." Her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "You've worked with bones before. Cut them. Saved lives by removing limbs. They've been watching you since you arrived at the park." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the cave's dampness. "The phantom pain." "Yes," Elena nodded eagerly, her neck moving at an unnatural angle. "They've been practicing on you, learning how your nerves work, how to play you." I looked around the cave and realized it wasn't a cave at all. It was a massive concert hall with stalactites and stalagmites forming rows of seats that stretched up into darkness, and in those seats... "Oh God," I whispered. "Skeletons, hundreds of them, thousands maybe, sitting perfectly still, empty eye sockets all facing toward a central stage area where more of the bone players stood, arranged in a semicircle." "Who are they?" I asked, though I feared the answer. "The audience," Elena said, her voice full of reverence. "Everyone who ever died from bone injuries. They've been waiting for the masterpiece." My medical bag lay a few feet away. I inched toward it, trying not to draw attention. "And what's the masterpiece?" Eleanor's face split into a smile too wide for her face. "The Symphony of Surgical Necessity. A piece that will open the door permanently." She gestured to a raised platform where my bone saw hovered in mid-air, glowing brightly. They need you to conduct. And if I refuse? Her expression darkened. Then they'll use me instead. But I'm not as good as you. I don't understand bones like you do. It would be messy. A skeletal figure approached, carrying what looked like a violin made from a human spine, with rib bones forming the body. It offered the instrument to me with a formal bow. "Every person you've ever operated on," Elena continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Every bone you've ever cut. They remember, they sing about it, and now they'll sing together." I felt sick. Those were real people, soldiers I'd tried to save. "The song is almost ready," Elena said. Her skin was growing more transparent by the second. I could clearly see her skeleton now, glowing beneath her flesh. "They just need a conductor who understands the pain." My hand crept closer to my medical bag. If I could just reach my surgical scissors. A horrible cracking sound filled the chamber. One of the hikers from the forest, still alive, was being dragged to the center of the stage. His arms were bent at impossible angles, bones breaking in sequence to create a rhythmic, snapping sound. "Stop it!" I shouted, lunging for my bag. I grabbed the scissors just as Elena seized my other arm. Her grip was inhumanly strong, her fingers digging into my flesh. "Don't you understand? This is beautiful, this is art. This is torture," I said through gritted teeth. The bone musicians began to play, using the hikers' breaking bones as percussion. The sound was horrific yet hypnotic, making my vision swim. I felt my own bones vibrate in response, as if eager to join the orchestra. Elena's eyes rolled back in her head as she began to conduct, her arms moving in jerky patterns. The music grew louder. My bone saw floated higher, its edge beginning to cut through the air itself, opening another rift like the one in the forest. Through the widening tear, I could see something massive and ancient trying to push through. A conductor made entirely of fused human skeletons, raising a baton made from countless finger bones. I had to act now. With all my strength, I drove the surgical scissors into the ground between Elena and the rift. The metal pierced the stone floor like it was butter, sending a shock wave through the chamber. The music faltered. Elena screamed, a sound so full of pain it hardly seemed human. The bone musicians turned toward me, their empty sockets somehow conveying rage. "I understand bones," I said, standing up despite the agony shooting through my phantom limbs. "I understand pain, but I also understand healing." I grabbed my bone saw from the air. The moment my fingers touched it, memories flooded back, not just of amputations, but of every life I'd saved, every person I'd helped heal. "You've been using my pain," I told the skeletal audience. "But you forgot what that pain was for." I raised the saw high. It was for saving lives, and with all my strength, I brought it down on the rift they'd been creating as the bone choir surged toward me, and Elena's scream reached an impossible pitch that shattered stalactites overhead. The moment my bone saw struck the rift, a sound, like 1,000 crystal glasses shattering, filled the chamber. Light exploded outward, blinding me. I felt my phantom limbs burn with real pain, not the echo of old trauma, but fresh agony, as if my arms were being torn from my body all over again. When my vision cleared, the skeletal audience was on its feet. The bone musicians had surrounded Elena, who lay crumpled on the ground, her body convulsing. The rift hung in the air, halfway closed, but still pulsing with sickly blue light. "Let her go," I shouted, brandishing my bone saw. "Your concert's over." Now the largest skeleton, the one I now understood to be their conductor, stepped forward. It had no mouth, but somehow I heard its voice in my head, the sound of bones grinding against each other. The symphony must be completed. The door must be opened fully. "Not today," I said, "and not with her." Then we will use you. You understand. The music of pain. You have conducted it many times. Images flashed through my mind, every amputation I'd ever performed, every scream I'd heard on the battlefield, every life I'd saved by cutting through bone. That wasn't music, I said. That was necessity. That was healing. It was beautiful. The skeleton conductor raised its hands, and my phantom pain flared so intensely I fell to my knees. It was using my nerve damage against me, playing my phantom limbs like instruments. Through tears of pain, I saw Elena stirring, her skin no longer transparent, but her eyes still vacant. She began to crawl toward a collection of surgical tools that had appeared on the ground, my old field kit, somehow transported here from my past. The bone musicians began to play again, a melody that made my teeth vibrate and my vision blur. With each note, the rift widened slightly, and I could see more of what waited on the other side, an endless concert hall filled with skeletal figures stretching across dimensions. "Join us," the conductor's voice scraped in my mind. "Become a violinist. Play the bones of the living." "Never!" I gasped, fighting through the pain. Elena had reached the surgical tools. To my horror, she picked up a scalpel and held it to her own ear. "Elena, no!" I screamed. But it was too late. With one swift movement, she sliced through her eardrum. Then the other. Blood trickled down her neck as she collapsed again. The music faltered. The bone musicians seemed confused, their rhythm disrupted. I realized what Elena had done. She'd cut herself off from their music, the only way she knew. Oh, this was my chance. Gritting my teeth against the pain, I staggered to my feet and raised my bone saw once more. The phantom agony in my arms was unbearable, but I forced myself forward, step by step, toward the rift. The conductor raised its bony hands higher, trying to regain control of the symphony. I felt my bones respond, vibrating painfully, but Elena's action had broken something in their power. I thought of all the soldiers I couldn't save, all the limbs I'd amputated, all the pain I'd caused in the name of healing, and suddenly I understood what I had to do. "You want my pain," I shouted at the skeletal audience. "You want to play my phantom limbs? Then take them." I plunged the bone saw not into the rift, but into the space where my phantom pain was worst, the air beside my actual arms, where my brain insisted limbs still existed. The saw met resistance, as if cutting through invisible flesh. The pain was blinding, all-consuming. I screamed as I felt myself cutting through limbs that weren't there, amputating phantoms. Blood appeared from nowhere, splattering the ground, though my real arms remained intact. The skeletal conductor lunged for me, but too late. My phantom limbs, the source of their power over me, fell away into nothingness. The pain that had defined me for years vanished in an instant, leaving a hollow silence in my mind. The rift began to collapse. The bone musician's instruments crumbled to dust. The conductor reached for me one last time, its bony fingers inches from my face before it was yanked backward into the closing tear between worlds. The chamber shook violently. Stalactites crashed down around us as the concert hall began to collapse. I crawled to Elena, who lay motionless but breathing, blood still seeping from her ruined ears. "We have to go," I said, though I knew she couldn't hear me. I hoisted her onto my shoulders and staggered toward a fissure in the wall that seemed to lead upward. The ground heaved beneath us as the bone audience was sucked back through the closing rift, their silent screams vibrating in my skull. We climbed for what felt like hours, the blue light fading behind us, replaced by the grey glow of dawn, filtering down from above. Finally, we emerged into the forest, the old logging camp unrecognizable, trees fallen and earth churned as if by an earthquake. The rain had stopped. The forest was utterly silent. No birds, no insects, no wind in the trees. Just silence so complete it felt like a physical presence. Elena stirred on the ground where I'd laid her. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on my face. She pointed to her ears and shook her head sadly. "Can you hear anything?" I asked, knowing she couldn't hear my words, but hoping she could read my lips. She shook her head again, then pointed to the air around us and smiled faintly. "What?" I asked. She took my hand and pressed it against her throat, then made a humming sound. I couldn't hear it, but I could feel the vibration through her skin. "You can hear it," I realized. "You can still hear the bone music." She nodded, tears filling her eyes. She pantomimed playing a violin, then covered her ears and shook her head violently. I understood. She would never hear normal music again, only the echoes of what the ossuary choir had played through her. I helped her to her feet, and together we made our way back toward the ranger station. With each step, I marveled at the absence of pain in my phantom limbs. For the first time in years, my brain no longer insisted on feeling what wasn't there. But as we walked, I noticed something strange. New saplings were already pushing up through the churned earth, growing at an impossible rate. Their trunks were oddly shaped, with hollow chambers like woodwind instruments. And though the forest was silent to my ears, I could feel a faint vibration through the soles of my boots. A new kind of music, barely perceptible. Eleanor felt it too. She stopped, pressed her hand against one of the new trees, and smiled. Whatever she could hear, it didn't frighten her. As we reached the edge of the park, I looked back one last time. The forest seemed different somehow, not threatening, but vigilant. The ossuary choir was gone, sealed away by my sacrifice. But something remained, a counter-melody, a healing song played through living wood instead of dead bone. I would never hear it the way Elena could, but sometimes, when the rain falls just right and the wind moves through those strange hollow trees, I swear I can feel it in my bones, the echo of a symphony still being written, note by note, in the language of growth instead of decay. Elena touched my arm and pointed to her heart, then to the forest, then to me. A simple message. We were connected now, all three of us, by the music none of us had chosen, but all of us had survived. I nodded and took her hand. Together, we walked out of the silent forest and back into a world of ordinary sounds, a world that would never know how close it had come to hearing the Bone Singer's final, terrible symphony. My name is David Thorne. I've been a ranger at Mammoth Cave National Park for 11 years now, though most visitors would never guess what I did before this. The long sleeves of my uniform hide the worst of my scars, chemical burns that crawl across my skin like maps of places I wish I could forget. It's a cold October morning in 1981, and I'm standing at the cave entrance, watching my breath cloud in the air. There's something different about today. The cave is breathing too. I can taste it. That exhale from deep underground carries something metallic, like copper pennies mixed with the sharp sting of formaldehyde. It reminds me of the labs, of things I've spent years trying to forget. I roll down my sleeves despite the chill. When the temperature drops, the scars on my arms change. The burn patterns shift and move, forming faces of people whose names were only numbers in CIA files, test subjects, my subjects. I was young and believed we were serving our country. By the time I understood what we were really doing, the damage was already done, to them and to me. A school bus pulls into the parking lot, today's tour group. I touch the briefcase by my feet, making sure it's still there. Inside are the files I can't bring myself to destroy, the last evidence of what we did to those people. I've carried them with me for years, unable to let go, but terrified someone will find them. "Good morning," I call out as the group approaches. Mostly families, a few couples, and a woman who walks with the confident step of someone used to command. She looks at me with narrowed eyes, analytical, like she can see through my uniform to the scars beneath. I'm Dr. Lisa Chen, she says, extending her hand. Forensic pathologist. I've always wanted to see these caves. My hand trembles slightly as I shake hers. Her grip is firm, surgical. I wonder what those hands have cut open, what secrets they've pulled from dead flesh. David Thorne, I reply. I'll be your guide today. As we enter the cave mouth, I feel the familiar tightness in my chest. The limestone walls around us seem to weep today, droplets of moisture that smell nothing like normal cave condensation. It's sweeter, organic, like spinal fluid. I've smelled it before in labs where we opened people to see what made them tick. The tourists chatter excitedly, unaware, but Dr. Chen pauses, her nostrils flaring slightly. She smells it too. Our eyes meet, and in that moment, I know we both recognize something is very wrong here. Does anyone else hear that? Asks a boy near the back of the group. I strain my ears, and that's when I notice it. The cave acoustics are amplifying our heartbeats, turning them into a thunderous primal rhythm that echoes through the passageways ahead. Like the cave itself is alive, pumping blood through stone veins. My hand touches the cold limestone wall and immediately begins to shake. The stone feels wrong, soft, yielding, like pressing a scalpel into living tissue. Let's continue, I say, pulling my hand away quickly. Stay close and don't touch anything. As I lead them deeper, I can't shake the feeling that we're not moving through a cave at all, but being swallowed whole. The tour group follows me down the main passage. I've walked this path hundreds of times, but today the limestone walls feel like they're closing in. Dr. Chen stays near the front, her eyes scanning everything with a doctor's attention to detail. Is it normal for the walls to be wet like this? She asks quietly, pointing to a section where the stone glistens. I shake my head. Not like that, no. A young girl in a red jacket tugs on her mother's sleeve. Mum, I feel like someone's watching me, she whispers, but loud enough that we all hear it. Others nod in agreement. A man with a camera around his neck says, yeah, it's like being under a microscope or something. I've never heard tourists describe it quite that way before. Being dissected by invisible eyes. The hair on my arm stands up despite the dampness and cool air. As we reach the cathedral room, a massive chamber with ceilings so high our flashlights barely reach it, I notice something embedded in the flowstone near the path. I quickly step in front of it, but Dr. Chen has already seen it. Is that, she begins, just an unusual rock formation? I cut her off, but we both know what it is, what looks exactly like an ancient scalpel, somehow preserved in the stone, as if it had been there for thousands of years. I hurry the group along, but Dr. Chen hangs back. From the corner of my eye, I see her touch the wall, examining something closely. She pulls her hand away, staring at her fingertips. Mr. Thorne, she calls to me. Could you come look at this? I walk back, my heart pounding. On her fingers is a smear of something pink and cellular, not limestone, not mineral. This appears to be preserved tissue, she says under her breath. Human tissue. That's impossible, I whisper, but my scars begin to itch and burn. As the tourists take photos of stalactites, I pull Dr. Chen aside. We need to turn back. Why? She asks, her eyes bright with scientific curiosity. This could be an incredible discovery. Trust me, I say. Something's wrong here. The sound of children's laughter draws our attention. Near the back of the group, 3 kids are kneeling, drawing in the dust on a flat rock. I walk over, expecting to find stick figures or names. Instead, I see detailed drawings of human organs, a heart with all 4 chambers correctly placed, a brain with the cerebellum perfectly proportioned, a cross-section of a kidney. The children look up at me with empty eyes. How do you know what these look like? I ask, my voice shaking. The walls told us, says a boy who can't be more than 8 years old. A woman screams from the front of the group. My flashlight beam finds her pointing at the cave wall, where the mineral deposits have formed what looks exactly like a human rib cage, complete with a spine and spreading outward like wings. It's just the way the minerals formed, I say, trying to keep my voice steady. Limestone can create unusual shapes. But as I turn to lead them onward, I notice something that stops me cold. The path ahead isn't right. The passage that should lead to the frozen Niagara Formation is now curving downward into an area I've never seen before. The map in my pocket shows one route, but the cave in front of us shows another. "Is everything all right, Ranger Thorn?" Dr. Chen asks, watching my face carefully. I touch the wall again, and this time when my hand shakes, I feel something warm trickle down my arm. My scars are bleeding. The face is shifting and moving as if trying to speak. "We need to go back," I say firmly. "Now!" But as I turn around, I realize the path behind us has changed too. We're no longer on the tour route at all. "I think we're lost," someone says nervously. "That's impossible," I reply, though I know it isn't. Just stay calm and stay together. In the distance, something that sounds like a heartbeat grows louder, and beneath that, almost too quiet to hear, the sound of metal tools being arranged on a tray. "Everyone stay close," I order, trying to keep my voice calm. I pull out my emergency radio, but all I get is static with a rhythm that sounds too much like breathing. A middle-aged man pushes to the front of the group. "I demand to know what's going on. We paid for the standard tour, not whatever this is." "Sir, please," I begin, but Dr. Chen interrupts. "Look at the water." She points to a small stream running along the cave floor. The beam of her flashlight reveals a reddish tint to the water that wasn't there before. "Is that blood?" someone whispers. "It's just iron in the rocks," I say quickly. "Very common in caves. But I've never seen the water run this color in all my years here." Dr. Chen kneels by the stream, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. She dips her finger in the water and examines it closely. "This isn't just minerals," she says quietly, so only I can hear. "This has hemoglobin in it." My emergency kit suddenly feels heavy on my belt. I open it to get the first aid. Supplies, but freeze when I see the contents. The bandages, antiseptic wipes, and scissors have rearranged themselves into neat rows, exactly like the surgical trays I used to prepare in the CIA labs. A teenage girl screams, pointing at my face. "Your scars! They're moving!" I touch my cheek and feel the raised tissue shifting beneath my fingers like worms under soil. In the reflection of a puddle, I see the burn marks rearranging into a face I recognize. Subject 117, a woman who never made it out of our facility. "It's just the shadows from your flashlight," I lie. "Everyone turn off your lights for a moment. Let your eyes adjust to the darkness. When the lights go out, I expect complete blackness. Instead, there's a faint glow coming from deeper in the cave system. A glow that pulses like a heartbeat. "What is that?" someone asks. Before I can answer, a young boy points to a dark corner. "Who's that man?" There's no one there, at least no one living. But in the shadows, I see the outline of a figure I recognize from my nightmares, Subject 094, a political prisoner whose nervous system we mapped while he was still conscious. I blink, and the figure is gone. "We need to find another way out," I announce, trying to keep my voice steady. "This section of the cave isn't safe." As we move forward, following the eerie glow, Dr. Chen walks beside me. "Those aren't ordinary burn scars, are they?" she asks quietly. "Chemical burns," I admit, "from a lab accident." "And the faces?" I stop walking. "You can see them too?" She nods. "I'm a forensic pathologist, Mr. Thorn. I've spent my career reading stories told by flesh. The passage widens into a large chamber none of us has ever seen before. The walls here are different, smoother, almost polished, and embedded in them are what look like display cases. A woman approaches one, her flashlight illuminating the contents. She jumps back with a cry of horror. Inside the case, suspended in clear fluid, is a human hand, perfectly preserved. The fingers twitch slightly as the light hits them. "It's still alive," Dr. Chen whispers, her voice a mix of horror and fascination. More cases line the walls, each containing parts of human anatomy, organs, limbs, cross-sections of torsos, all somehow preserved in a state between life and death. "Welcome to my archives." The voice comes from everywhere and nowhere, deep and clinical. It speaks with the detached interest of a scientist discussing specimens. "Your cardiovascular systems are particularly robust," the voice continues, "especially the pathologist. Your hands have such experience." Dr. Chen's fingers twitch involuntarily, and she stares at them in horror. A man in hiking boots backs away from the cases. "What is this place? Who are you?" "I am the anatomist," the voice replies, "and you are in my library of experiences." The red stream at our feet begins to flow faster, and the walls of the chamber pulse like a living heart. In the far corner, something moves, a figure taking shape from the shadows. I reach for my flashlight, but Dr. Chen grabs my wrist. "Don't!" she warns. I don't think we want to see it clearly. Too late. A tourist panics and aims his high-powered flashlight at the corner. What we see there makes even Dr. Chen, with all her years in the morgue, gasp in horror. In the beam of the flashlight stands a figure that shouldn't exist. It looks almost human at first glance, the shape of a tall man in what might be a doctor's coat. But as my eyes adjust, I see the horror of what it really is. Its skin isn't skin at all, but a patchwork of preserved human tissue stitched together with surgical precision. Where a face should be, there's only a smooth surface with different eyes embedded at odd angles, blue, brown, green, all blinking independently. Its hands have too many fingers, each one looking like it came from a different person. "Turn off the light," I whisper urgently, but it's too late. The anatomist tilts its head, those mismatched eyes focusing on us with cold interest. "Such interesting specimens," it says, its voice now coming clearly from its direction. "Especially you two." It points at me and Dr. Chen with a hand that has 7 fingers. The tourists huddle together, some crying quietly, others frozen in shock. A mother pulls her children close, shielding their eyes. "What do you want from us?" I ask, stepping forward. My scars burn like fire now, the faces in them silently screaming. "The same thing you wanted from your subjects, David Thorne," it replies. "Knowledge, experience, understanding." My blood runs cold. It knows who I am, what I did. "How do you—" "Your guilt is written on your skin," the anatomist interrupts. "I can read it like a book. The chemicals you used, the pain you caused, it's all there in those beautiful scars." Dr. Chen looks at me, her expression a mix of horror and realization. "You weren't just in a lab accident, were you?" Before I can answer, the anatomist moves closer, its movements unnaturally smooth. The tourists back away, but one man trips and falls. His hand touches the red stream. He screams as his fingers begin to change, the skin becoming transparent, revealing the bones and tendons beneath. "Help me!" he cries as the transformation crawls up his arm. "Fascinating," Dr. Chen whispers, and there's something wrong with her voice now, a clinical detachment that wasn't there before. Her eyes have the same cold interest as the anatomist's. "Lisa," I say sharply, "don't look at it anymore." But she steps forward instead of back, her medical training overtaking her fear. "The preservation technique, it's perfect. How do you maintain cellular integrity without decay?" The anatomist seems pleased. "A colleague who understands my work. Would you like to see more?" To my horror, Dr. Chen nods. The walls of the chamber begin to change around us. What I thought were mineral formations reshape themselves into clear displays of human anatomy. A perfect cross-section of a human nervous system here. A beating heart there, lungs that still expand and contract. These are all people, I realize. Allowed, people you've collected, preserved, the anatomist corrects. Their experiences live on forever here. Their knowledge never fades, their pain never ends. A teenage girl points to one of the displays. That one's moving. She's right. Inside what looks like a mineral cocoon is a complete human body, perfectly preserved. The eyes are open, aware. The chest rises and falls with shallow breaths. That specimen is from 1947, the anatomist says proudly. A cave explorer who lost his way. His fear is particularly pure. Dr. Chen approaches the display, examining it with professional interest. The surgical technique is impossible, she murmurs. No human could make incisions this precise. I've had much practice, the anatomist replies. Would you like to see my workshop? Before anyone can respond, the chamber shifts again. The walls pull back, revealing a larger space filled with operating tables of stone. Each holds a body in various stages of dissection, all somehow still alive, eyes following our movements. This can't be real, someone behind me whispers, but I know it is. I've seen similar labs, similar subjects, though our work was crude compared to this. The guilt I've carried for years crashes over me in a wave. Let these people go, I demand. Take me instead. I've done things. I deserve this more than they do. The anatomist considers me. Your offer is noted, David Thorne. But why choose one when I can have all? It turns to Dr. Chen. Your hands have such knowledge. They've cut through flesh with purpose. Read the stories written in dead tissue. Imagine what they could do with my guidance. To my horror, Dr. Chen's expression is one of fascination, not fear. The medical knowledge here, it could revolutionize surgery, treatment, understanding of the human body. Lisa, no, I warn. It's influencing you somehow. But she doesn't seem to hear me. She's looking at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. They move on there, now making small, precise cutting motions in the air. I could save so many lives with what I could learn here, she whispers. You can't save lives by taking them, I argue. The anatomist laughs, a sound like surgical tools clinking together. But you did exactly that, didn't you, David? Sacrificed. The few for the many? Cut open the guilty to protect the innocent? The faces in my scars scream silently, accusing me. It's right. I'm no better than this thing. And that's when I realize what I have to do. Everyone get behind me, I order. The tourists, most of them rush to comply, but Dr. Chen remains near the anatomist, her eyes gleaming with unnatural curiosity. Lisa, this thing is in your head, I say firmly. Fight it. She blinks, momentary confusion crossing her face. David, I feel strange, like my mind isn't entirely my own. The anatomist places one of its many-fingered hands on her shoulder. You feel the pull of knowledge, Doctor, the desire to understand, to learn. I need to act fast. The faces in my scars are moving more urgently now, and suddenly I understand. They're not just memories of my guilt. They're a map. Each scar, each face, corresponds to a place in this chamber, to one of the anatomist's specimens. You've been collecting people for centuries, I say, trying to keep its attention, preserving their experiences, their pain, their knowledge, it corrects. Human lives are so brief. So much is lost when you die. I am the archive of all that would otherwise disappear. While it speaks, I study the chamber. The red stream flows toward a central point beneath the main operating table. That has to be the source of its power. The specimens from my time, I ask, pointing to my scars. Where do you keep them? The anatomist seems pleased by my interest. You begin to understand the importance of my work. It gestures to a section, of the chamber where several preserved bodies hang suspended in glowing fluid. Your victims are there. They came to me in their dreams, drawn by your guilt. Dr. Chen's hands are moving faster now, making cutting motions with increasing precision. I need to reach her before she's completely lost. I worked on political prisoners, I tell her, my voice breaking. People our government wanted information from. We told ourselves it was necessary, that the pain we caused would save American lives. Her eyes focus on me briefly. David, I've carried their faces with me for years, I continue, moving closer to her. But this thing, it keeps them in a state between life and death, preserved in eternal pain. The anatomist moves. Between us, enough talk, it's time to add to my collection. It raises a hand, and the stone operating tables begin to shift. That's when I make my move. I lunge forward, pushing past the anatomist toward the central operating table. My hand plunges into the red stream beneath it, and pain shoots up my arm as my skin becomes transparent, revealing muscle and bone beneath. But now I can feel the connection. My scars link me to every specimen in this chamber, every victim, every face. What are you doing? The anatomist demands, its voice losing its calm for the first time. What I should have done years ago, I reply through gritted teeth. Facing what I've done, I pull my briefcase from where it hangs at my side and throw it into the stream. The files inside, all the documentation of our experiments, dissolve in the red liquid, their energy flowing. Through the chamber, the faces in my scars begin to glow, and the specimens on the walls respond, their eyes opening wider, limbs twitching with renewed awareness. Stop! The anatomist commands, but it's too late. I look at Dr. Chen. Lisa, I need your help. Your hands know what to do. Her fingers twitch, fighting against the anatomist's influence. Then with a cry of determination, she rushes to my side and plunges her hands into the stream beside mine. The connection point is here, she says, her medical knowledge guiding. It's like a central nervous system. If we sever it, together we reach deeper into the stream, our flesh becoming transparent, revealing the structures beneath. The pain is unbearable, but I push through it, thinking of all the pain I caused others. The anatomist lunges for us, but the tourists finally find their courage. They form a human barrier, holding it back just long enough. Now, Lisa! I shout. Her surgeon's hands move with impossible precision, finding the central connection point in the stream. My hands follow hers, adding my strength to hers as we grasp the pulsing core of the anatomist's power. If we do this, Lisa warns, the feedback could kill us both. I know, I reply, but it will free them, all of them. With one final effort, we pull. The chamber erupts in light. The red stream turns white-hot, searing through my veins. I hear the anatomist scream, not one voice but hundreds, thousands, all the voices it has collected over centuries. The specimens on the walls begin to move, breaking free from their displays. The faces in my scars tear themselves away, becoming ghostly forms that drift toward freedom. The last thing I see before darkness takes me is Dr. Chen's face. Tears streaming down her cheeks as her hands continue their work, saving lives the way they were meant to. I'm sorry, I whisper to the faces as they float past me. I'm so sorry. Then everything goes white. I don't expect to wake up, but somehow I do. My eyes open to bright hospital lights. My body feels strange, distant, like I'm only partly connected to it. When I try to move my arm, nothing happens. He's awake, someone says. A nurse leans over me, checking my vitals. David? Another voice, familiar. Dr. Chen appears at my bedside, but she looks different. Her hands are wrapped in bandages, and there's a new intensity in her eyes. The tourists, I manage to ask, my voice barely a whisper. Safe, she says. They made it out. Search and rescue found them wandering near the cave entrance. Most of them don't remember what happened, or they've convinced themselves it was all a group hallucination from bad air in the cave. I try to nod, but again, nothing moves. And me, how bad is it? Lisa's expression turns grim. David, you should know that what we did in the cave, it changed us. The stream, the anatomist's power, it got into our systems. She unwraps one of her bandages, showing me her hand. At first it looks normal, but then I see it beneath her skin. There's a faint glow tracing the path of her veins, and her fingers move with tiny, precise movements, even when she's holding them still. I can perform surgeries now that should be impossible, she says quietly. I know things about the human body that no doctor should know. I can see inside people, David, see their pain, their injuries, just by looking at them. And me. I ask again, dreading the answer. Lisa takes a deep breath. Your body is preserving itself. We don't understand how. You haven't needed food or water since they found you. Your heart beats once every few hours, but your mind is fully active. Horror washes over me as I understand. I'm becoming like the specimens. She nods. Part of you is still in the cave system, I think, connected to it. The doctors here don't understand what's happening. They want to run tests, but I've been protecting you from that. No more experiments. The anatomist? Gone. At least I think so, but... She hesitates. The cave has been sealed off. Officially. It was a collapse, but really, they're afraid of what's down there. And lately, medical students at universities across the country have been reporting strange dreams. Dreams about performing surgery in limestone caves. I would shudder if I could move. It's not over. No, Lisa agrees. But we hurt it. Badly. The specimens we freed, I think they're at peace now. She reaches out, touching my face where the burn scars used to be. My skin is smooth now. The face is gone. They're free, David. You freed them. What happens now, I ask. I've arranged to have you transferred to a private facility, she says. Somewhere I can monitor your condition. And I'm going to use what I've learned. There are other things out there, like the anatomist, other collectors, other archives. She leans closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I can feel them, David. My hands know how to find them, how to stop them, and you'll help me. Whatever's happened to you, whatever you're becoming, we can use it. I think of all the pain I caused in my CIA days, all the lives I damaged in the name of protection, and now, somehow, I have a chance to make it right. The faces in my scars, I say. I can still feel them sometimes. Not on my skin anymore, but in my mind. Lisa nods. They're guiding you, using your connection to find others like them. Outside the window, storm clouds gather. Somewhere in the darkness, I sense others waking up, becoming aware. The anatomist was just one collector among many. We have work to do, I tell Lisa. She smiles grimly, her glowing hands already preparing for the battles ahead. Yes, she agrees. We do. In the distance, thunder rolls like the beating of a massive heart. The world has nightmares it hasn't even begun to face. But this time, I'll be fighting on the right side, and somewhere deep underground, in caves that breathe like living things, the archives are waiting. My name is Ezra Whitmore. I'm 52 years old, and I've lived in Hollow Creek, West Virginia my whole life. This land has been in my family since my great-grandfather's time. He died right here, shot by Pinkerton men during the mine wars back in 1921. They say his blood soaked into the soil where my house now stands. It was August 1974 when things started to go wrong. Everyone was talking about Nixon quitting. The coal companies were turning their backs on miners dying from black lung. Boys were still coming home from Vietnam in body bags. but here in Hollow Creek, we had our own kind of trouble. It started with the weather. We'd been suffering through the worst heat wave anyone could remember. The kind that makes your clothes stick to your skin and your thoughts move like molasses. Then one evening, everything changed. I was sitting on my porch sipping whiskey to fight the heat when the temperature dropped so fast it nearly took my breath away. One minute I was sweating. The next I could see my breath making clouds in the air. The thermometer by my door dropped to freezing in what seemed like minutes. That wasn't natural. Neither was the way the air suddenly tasted like metal, like blood mixed with coal dust. I've worked the mines long enough to know that taste, but I'd never felt it so strong above ground. I called out to my neighbor, Bill Jenkins, who was walking by. My voice sounded wrong, like it was bouncing back at me from walls that weren't there. Bill didn't seem to notice. He just kept walking, his steps too regular, like a wind-up toy. The clocks in my house started running backward that night. I thought I was seeing things, so I took one apart. The gears were turning the wrong way. Outside, shadows moved against where the sun should cast them. The calendar pages on my kitchen wall fluttered away, even though there wasn't any breeze. By morning, the phone lines were down. The radio said it was due to an ice storm, but there wasn't any ice anywhere else in the county, just here. The creek had flooded overnight and washed out the road, though not a drop of rain had fallen. From my porch, I could see the old mine tipples standing against the sky like the skeletons of giant beasts. The company houses dotted the hillside, most of them falling apart, but still with families inside. Nobody could afford to leave, even as the walls rotted around them. Something was wrong with the animals too. I watched a buck and two does walking in perfect circles in my yard for nearly an hour. Birds kept flying into my windows, not just once by accident, but over and over, like they were trying to get at something inside. When I walked down to the creek, all the fish were floating on top of the water, their white bellies facing the sky. My ears kept popping like I was driving up a mountain, though I hadn't left my property. My nose started bleeding for no reason. Sometimes it felt hard to breathe, like the air had gotten too thick. Then I heard it, the old mine whistle. It blew, at 5 a.m. sharp, just like it used to when I was a boy. But that's impossible. Those mines have been closed for decades. Nobody should be down there blowing that whistle. I stood on my porch listening, and that's when I heard the voices too. They were far away, speaking words I couldn't understand. Languages nobody around here has spoken in generations. I wiped blood from my nose and went back inside. The photos of my boys were watching me from the wall. I poured another whiskey, even though the sun had barely risen. Something was wrong in Hollow Creek. Something had woken up under the ground, where we'd been digging all these years. And I was afraid it had come for me. I should tell you about myself. Working in the mines isn't just a job. It gets into your body and never leaves. My hands shake all the time now, from setting off too many dynamite charges. My eyes twitch from years of squinting in the dark. And my lungs, well, they're full of coal dust. The doctor calls it black lung. When I cough, sometimes there's blood. I was a foreman at the Hollow Creek Mine number 7 for 15 years. That means I was in charge of making sure the men did their jobs and stayed safe. But the company always wanted more coal, faster and cheaper. They'd push us to cut corners, skip safety checks, ignore the warning signs. In 1969, I made a choice. I'll never forget. The methane detectors were showing high readings, but the company wanted us to meet our quota. I sent 12 men down into a section that should have been closed off. The explosion happened just after lunch break. I felt it from a mile away. The ground shook like God himself had stomped his foot. Those 12 men never came home. 3 of them were my own sons, James, Thomas, and Michael. I told everyone they died in Vietnam. It was easier that way. People respect a war hero. They don't respect a father who sent his own boys to die for a few extra tons of coal. After the accident, nobody in town would look me in the eye. My wife, Clara, couldn't stand to be near me. She left 6 months later. Now I live alone in this big old house, drinking too much and talking to photos on the wall. My family has a complicated history here. The truth is, the Whitmores weren't always miners. My grandfather and his father before him owned part of the coal company. They were the ones who called in the Pinkertons back in 1921. My family got rich by crushing the very people we came from. Then my father lost everything in bad investments, and suddenly we were just like everyone else, scratching a living from the same earth we once owned. I was sitting at my kitchen table, thinking about all this and nursing a glass of whiskey, when I heard a car pull up outside. I wasn't expecting anyone. Nobody visits me anymore. There was a knock at the door. When I opened it, I nearly fell over. "Hello, Dad," she said. It was Rebecca, my daughter. She was holding the hand of a little girl about 8 years old. "This is Lily," Rebecca said, "your granddaughter." I couldn't speak, I couldn't breathe, because Rebecca died in 1971. Car accident on Route 16. I buried her myself, but here she was, standing on my porch, looking exactly the same as the day. She left home, and with a child I'd never seen before. "Aren't you going to invite us in?" she asked. Her voice sounded distant, like it was coming through water. I stepped aside, and they walked past me into the house. The little girl, Lily, stopped and looked up at me, with eyes that seemed too old for her face. "You don't look very good, Grandpa," she said. "That night I couldn't sleep. I kept getting up to check if Rebecca and Lily were really there in the guest room. Each time I peeked in, they were sleeping soundly, but something wasn't right. I couldn't remember Rebecca's funeral clearly anymore. I found newspaper clippings in my desk drawer, one saying she died in the car crash, another saying she moved to Cincinnati, a third claiming she'd never existed at all. The black lung medicine makes me see things sometimes. The doctor warned me about that. But these hallucinations seemed more real than anything else in my life. I could touch Rebecca's hand. I could hear Lily's laugh. By morning, I wasn't sure of anything anymore. Had I really lost my sons in the mine? Or was that just a bad dream? Was I even alive? Or had I died in that explosion too, trapped in some kind of purgatory where time doesn't work right? I sat on the porch, watching the sun rise in the wrong direction, and wondered which version of my life was the lie. Rebecca made breakfast like nothing was wrong. Lily sat at the table coloring with crayons she'd found in an old drawer. I watched them, trying to make sense of what was happening. "I need to get the mail," I said, mostly to see if my voice still worked. "The walk to my mailbox is short, just down the gravel path to the road." Inside was the usual junk and a newspaper. I unfolded it on my way back to the house and stopped dead in my tracks. There, on the front page, was my own obituary. Ezra Whitmore, 52, passed away tomorrow. The date on the paper was for the next day, and the handwriting. It wasn't printed. It was written in Clara's handwriting, my ex-wife, who I hadn't seen in years. My mouth filled with the taste of copper pennies. From somewhere in the distance I heard children singing old mining songs, the kind they used to sing in the 1800s when kids as young as 8 worked in the mines. I dropped the paper and ran back to the house. I needed to see my face, to make sure I was still me. The bathroom mirror showed a younger man staring back, myself as I looked in 1969, before the accident. As I reached out to touch the glass, it cracked from corner to corner. "Dad, are you okay?" Rebecca called from the kitchen. I splashed water on my face and went back out. "I'm fine," I lied. After breakfast, I walked outside to clear my head. That's when I noticed the footprints in the coal dust that always settles over everything here. They led from my porch toward the old mine entrance up the hill. I followed them, noticing with growing dread that they matched my work boots exactly. But I hadn't been up to the mine in years. The footprints stopped at the boarded-up entrance. The boards were broken, like someone had gone inside or come out. When I got back to the house, there were lunch pails on my kitchen table. 12 of them arranged in a perfect circle. The kind miners carry, they were still warm to the touch, and inside each one was a sandwich, an apple, and a thermos of coffee. As I watched, the food began to rot, the bread turning green with mold, the apples shriveling until they were nothing but brown mush. Rebecca and Lily were nowhere to be found. From outside came the sounds of mining equipment starting up. The creak of cartwheels, the rumble of conveyor belts, the ping of picks hitting rock, but the mine had been closed for years. Then I heard my own voice echoing, as if from the bottom of a deep shaft. "Keep digging, boys. Company wants another 10 tons before quitting time." It was what I'd said that day in 1969, just before the explosion. I ran upstairs to my bedroom, where I keep the photos of my sons. The pictures were changing before my eyes. James, who had been 23 when he died, now looked 20 in his photo, then 18, then 15. I watched as my boys grew younger in their frames, becoming children, then toddlers, then babies. Then they disappeared altogether, leaving nothing but empty frames. Outside, the creek water had turned black as ink. The trees in my yard were leaking dark fluid that looked like coal dust but smelled like blood. The ground trembled beneath my feet with the phantom echo of dynamite blasts. When I looked up at the hills, I saw double. The present day Hollow Creek abandoned and dying, and layered on top of it like a photograph negative, the Hollow Creek of 1921. I could see Pinkerton men with rifles stalking across my yard. I could see miners running, falling as they were shot in the back. Past and present were happening at the same time. And in the middle of it all stood Rebecca and Lily, holding hands, watching me with empty eyes. "It's time, Dad," Rebecca said. "Time to go back to the mine." Lily nodded, her face serious. "They're waiting for you, Grandpa. They've been waiting a long time." I knew then that whatever was happening wasn't just in my head. Something had broken in Hollow Creek, in time itself, and I was being pulled back to face what I'd done. I didn't want to go to the mine. Every instinct told me to run the other way. But where would I go? The roads were washed out, the phones were dead, and something told me that whatever was happening would follow me anyway. Rebecca and Lily walked ahead of me up the path to mine. Avon. Their feet barely seemed to touch the ground. We reached the broken boards at the entrance, and without a word, they slipped inside. I hesitated, then followed. The tunnel should have been dark, but it glowed with a faint blue light that seemed to come from the coal itself. The air was thick and hard to breathe. Water dripped from the ceiling, but when it hit the ground, it sizzled like it was landing on a hot stove. "Rebecca," I called out. "Lily, where are you?" My voice echoed strangely, coming back to me as different words, different voices. "Help us," the echo said. "Why did you send us here?" I rounded a corner and stopped dead. The tunnel opened into a large chamber that hadn't been there before, and in the center stood something that made my blood freeze. It was tall, maybe 12 feet high. Its body seemed made of coal dust and bone, swirling together like a tornado that had almost taken human shape. But the worst part was its face, or rather, faces. I recognized each one, the 12 miners who had died in the explosion, my 3 sons among them. The faces shifted and changed, melting into one another, all of them staring at me with accusing eyes. "What are you?" I whispered. When it spoke, it used all 12 voices at once. "We are hunger. We are justice. We are what happens when men are treated as less than human, when they're fed to the earth for profit." I'd heard old stories about the Wendigo, a creature from Native American legends, a spirit of hunger that was never satisfied. But this wasn't the forest monster from those tales. This was something born from the mines, from generations of men working and dying in the dark. "Where's Rebecca?" I asked. "Where's Lily?" The thing shifted, part of its swirling mass taking the shape of my daughter. "Rebecca has been dead for years," it said with her voice. "You know that, Ezra. You've always known that." Another part of it formed into Lily's shape. And I was never real, the child's voice said. At least, not the way you think. The child's shape stepped forward, and as it did, its features changed. The face became younger, more familiar. I was looking at myself as a boy, before I'd ever gone into the mines, before I'd become part of the system that killed men for coal. You used to be me, the child Ezra said. Before you forgot what it meant to care about people more than money, I backed away. This isn't real. It's the medicine. It's making me see things. I pulled out the revolver I'd brought with me and fired at the creature. The bullets passed through it like it was made of smoke. The faces in its body laughed. Your guilt makes us stronger, the voices said together. Your self-hatred feeds us. The tunnel behind me collapsed. The walls of the chamber began to close in. I smelled methane gas building up. The same smell from that day in 1969. The creature surrounded me, and suddenly I was reliving every decision I'd ever made that led to death. Every time I'd chosen profit over safety. But it also showed me other paths, what might have happened if I'd stood up to the company, if I'd refused to send my men, my sons, into danger. You died in the explosion, Ezra, the voices said. Everything since has been the moment of your death stretched out over years, your punishment, your purgatory. I fell to my knees. No, I said. I survived. I'm still here. Are you? It asked, and as it spoke, I remembered. I remembered the heat of the explosion, the roar of the fire, the feeling of my lungs filling with gas and dust. I remembered dying alongside my men, my boys. Then why am I still here? I asked. Because you haven't accepted what you did, the child Ezra said. You haven't faced your responsibility. The chamber grew smaller, the methane smell stronger. The faces of the dead watched me, waiting for my answer. I got to my feet slowly. The chamber had become an exact copy of the section where the explosion happened. I could see the support beams, worn thin from cutting corners. The methane detectors, their warning lights disabled to keep production going. The faces of my men, my sons, looking to me for orders. What do you want from me? I asked the creature. The truth, it answered with a dozen voices. Choose the truth or choose the lie, but this time, choose knowing what it means. I understood then. I'd been given a chance that nobody gets, to face my mistakes and maybe make them right, or to keep hiding from them forever. Show me, I said. The child Ezra took my hand. Together, we walked deeper into the mine, into the moment of the explosion. Time slowed down around us. I could see the spark that would start it all. A tiny light hanging in the air, frozen. This is where it happened, I said. One by one, the dead miners stepped out of the swirling mass of the Wendigo. They stood before me in a line. I knew all their names. Bill Hawkins, who had 5 kids at home, Sam Tucker, who was saving to go to college, Pete Dannon, who sang songs while he worked, and my boys, James, Thomas, and Michael. I'm sorry, I said to each of them. I knew the methane levels were too high. I knew the supports weren't strong enough. I knew we shouldn't have been working this section. Why did you send us in anyway? James asked. His voice wasn't angry, just sad. Because the company wanted more coal, I said. Because I was afraid of losing my job. Because I'd stopped seeing you as people and started seeing you as tools to meet a quota. Each truth hurt to say out loud, but with each one the weight on my chest got a little lighter. The child Ezra looked up at me. There's one more choice, she said. You can change things. How? This already happened. For you, it's still happening. You're still in that moment between life and death. You can choose differently. I understood what she was offering, a chance to die in their place, to save them, my sons included, by sacrificing myself. Would that really change anything, I asked? Would the mines suddenly become safe? Would the company start caring about the men? The Wendigos' many faces looked sad. No, the system would continue. Other men would die in other mines. Your sacrifice would save these 12 lives, but not the hundreds who came before, or the hundreds who will come after. Then what's the point? I asked. The point is taking responsibility, my son Thomas said, not just for our deaths, but for being part of something that treats people as disposable. I thought about that, about all the years I'd spent as foreman, pushing men to work faster, dig deeper, ignore the warning signs, and before that, my family's role as mine owners, exploiting generations of workers. I accept it, I said finally. I accept what I did. I accept that I died in that explosion, that I should have died in it, and I accept that my death doesn't fix the bigger problem. As I spoke, I felt my body changing. Coal dust crept up my legs, replacing flesh with something darker. I was becoming part of the Wendigo, adding my guilt to its hunger for justice. Is this punishment? I asked as the transformation spread. No, said Michael, my youngest. It's purpose. Someone needs to remember what happened here. Someone needs to make sure it doesn't keep happening without consequences. I understood then. The Wendigo wasn't evil. It was justice for people who never got justice in life. It would remain in Hollow Creek, hunting those who profited from death. Coal barons, mining executives, politicians who looked the other way when safety regulations were ignored. As the last of my human form disappeared into the swirling mass, I felt peace for the first time in years. I had finally told the truth. I had finally stopped running. The spark unfroze. The explosion happened. And this time, I didn't try to escape it. But that's not the end of the story, because the mines are still open all across this country. Men still die for coal that powers your lights and heats your homes. Companies still cut corners. Executives still get rich while workers get sick. And in Hollow Creek, something still walks the abandoned tunnels. Something watches, something waits, something remembers. And if you profit from other people's suffering, if you build your comfort on their pain, it might come looking for you. Next, turn off your lights tonight. Listen to the darkness. That sound you hear might be the wind, or it might be the Wendigo of Hollow Creek, coming to ask what role you play in the story. My name is Joseph Crowfeather. I'm 45 years old, and I've lived my whole life in this strange place where the Navajo Nation meets government land. It's 1989, and things have been getting weird lately. Really weird. I grew up knowing this. Land has bad memories. My grandmother told me stories about the Long Walk of 1864, when soldiers forced our people to march hundreds of miles from our homes. Many died along the way. The earth here remembers that pain. Sometimes I think I can feel it when I walk across the cracked desert ground. These days, things are tough for everyone on the reservation. President Reagan's people cut all our programs. The little money we had for health clinics, schools, and clean water, gone. Meanwhile, the mining companies keep digging for uranium, poisoning our water and making people sick. Last week, something impossible happened. Snow fell, but only on the sacred burial grounds near Black Mesa. Nowhere else. The weather forecasters on TV called it a localized anomaly. My grandmother would have called it a warning. Walking the land now feels wrong. The air shimmers with heat waves even when it's freezing cold. Everything tastes like ash in my mouth. When I drink water, I taste metal and something else I can't name. Time isn't working right either. Yesterday, I was checking some old petroglyphs for the Cultural Resources Survey, and I swear they changed when I looked away. Ancient carvings of hunters and rain spirits now showed strange new shapes. Men in suits, giant machines digging into the earth, birds falling from the sky. Nobody can get a clear phone signal anymore. The roads don't go where they used to. 3 tribal police officers got lost last month, driving a route they've taken for years. They ended up 50 miles from where they should have been, with no idea how they got there. The worst part is what they're doing to our sacred sites. I watched bulldozers tear up a prayer circle that's been used for 1,000 years. The company men said they needed to test the soil for uranium deposits. When the medicine man tried to perform a blessing ceremony, military helicopters flew so low the sand whipped into everyone's eyes. They claimed it was a training exercise. It always is. The animals are acting strange too. Coyotes travel in packs of 20 or 30 now, moving together like they're having a meeting. The ravens watch us, and sometimes I swear they speak in perfect English. Time's running out. One croaked at me from a fence post. I told myself it was my imagination. My radiation detector keeps going crazy. That's my job, checking radiation levels at the mines. But now it clicks everywhere, even miles from any mining site. When I try to find the source, it seems to move, like something is playing games with me. The tribal council and the government tell completely different stories about what's happening here. The official report says the land is safe, the water is clean, and the mines bring jobs we need. But our elders tell stories of sickness, of children born with problems, of the earth itself growing angry at how we've treated it. Both stories can't be true. But somehow, in this place, they both are. My grandmother, before she died, or disappeared, or maybe she's still here, I can't keep the story straight anymore, said something was coming, something born from the place where greed meets suffering, something wearing the face of progress but hiding the hunger of a monster. I didn't believe her then. I was too busy trying to be the perfect company man. Now I'm not so sure. Because yesterday I saw her standing by the old trading post. She looked exactly like she did when I was a boy. And when she spoke, her voice was clear as day. Joseph, the land is awake now, and it remembers what you've done. I've always been caught between two worlds. My mother was full Navajo, my father white. Growing up, I never felt like I belonged anywhere completely. On the reservation, some people called me half-breed behind my back. In town, white folks would touch my long black hair without asking, like I was some kind of zoo animal. The government has this thing called blood quantum, a fancy way of measuring how Indian you are. According to their papers, I'm not Indian enough to qualify for certain tribal benefits. But to white society, I'm too Indian to fully fit in, so I live on the edge of both worlds. Never completely welcome in either one. I became a uranium mine safety inspector 15 years ago. It seemed like a good job, decent money, respect from both sides. I told myself I was protecting the workers by making sure the mines followed safety rules, but deep down, I knew the truth. Those mines were slowly killing my mother's people, poisoning the water and the land. Cancer rates on the reservation are through the roof. Kids are born with health problems we never saw before. My grandmother running bare never let me forget it either. You inspect the monster that eats our earth, she told me the last time I visited her small house on the reservation. You feed it with your papers and your stamps of approval. I stopped visiting after that. It was easier to stay away than face her disappointment. She died 3 years ago. At least, that's what I remember most days. Sometimes I wake up thinking she disappeared during a ceremony. Other mornings, I have vivid memories of her dying violently during a protest at the mine. My memories keep shifting, like sand in the wind. The worst part is the reports. I've been faking them for years, not completely. I note the small violations, the easy fixes. But the big problems, the dangerous radiation levels, the contaminated groundwater, I look the other way. The mining company executives pat me on the back, tell me I'm being realistic about keeping jobs in the community. We need people like you, Joe, they say, someone who understands both sides. What they really mean is, we need Indians who will sell out other Indians. I play both sides too well. When I'm with tribal members, I talk about my mother's family, wear turquoise jewelry, mention traditional teachings. When I'm with mining executives, I laugh at their racist jokes, talk about property rights. wear my hair tied back neatly. I'm whatever people need me to be in the moment. But lately I don't know who I am anymore. Last night I dreamed in Navajo, a language I barely speak. I woke up singing a healing song I've never learned. Sometimes I catch myself thinking in strange words that don't sound like any language I know. And then there's my grandmother. I saw her again yesterday, standing by my truck when I finished inspecting mine number 7. She looked solid as you or me, not like a ghost at all. "The land is sick, Joseph," she said, "and so are you. Can't you feel it?" I could. My teeth have felt loose in my gums for weeks now. Food tastes like metal. Sometimes I spit, and my saliva looks dark, almost black in certain lights. "You're not real," I told her. "You died years ago." "Did I?" she asked, her face serious. "Are you sure about that? Your memories aren't trustworthy anymore. Nothing is." "I'm just tired," I said. "Working too hard. Maybe radiation exposure is making me see things." She laughed, but not like it was funny. "The radiation isn't causing the visions, Joseph. The visions are causing the radiation." Before I could ask what that meant, she was gone. Just vanished, like someone turned off a movie projector. I drove home scared and confused. On the way, I passed a group of coyotes sitting in a perfect circle in the middle of an empty field. They turned their heads in unison to watch me drive by. One of them stood on its hind legs and waved. When I got home, I looked in the bathroom mirror and almost screamed. For a split second, I didn't see my usual face, the face of a middle-aged man with short cropped hair and a polo shirt. Instead, I saw a traditional Navajo warrior with long hair and ceremonial paint. Then I blinked, and it was just regular. Me again. I called the company doctor this morning, told him about the headaches, the metallic taste, the black saliva. Not the visions or the coyotes or my dead grandmother, of course. "Probably just stress," he said without even examining me. "Take some time off if you need to. But we need that new safety report by Friday. The report for a mine that's showing radiation levels 10 times higher than legal limits. The report I'm planning to falsify. Again." As I hung up the phone, I heard my grandmother's voice clear as day. "The land remembers what you've done, Joseph, and now it wants you to choose a side." Things got really strange last week. I was checking radiation levels at the edge of mine number 4, and my Geiger counter went crazy, clicking so fast it sounded like one long buzz. The needle buried itself at the highest reading. I've never seen anything like it. But when I moved 10 feet to the left, nothing. Normal background radiation. Then 10 feet to the right, it screamed again. It was like the radiation was moving, following me. That's not how radiation works. It doesn't follow you like a pet dog. I went home that night and brushed my teeth. When I spit into the sink, it was black as oil. The taste in my mouth was like licking a battery. My gums bled when I touched them. I should have been terrified, should have driven straight to a hospital in Flagstaff. Instead, I just stared at the sink, watching my black spit swirl down the drain. The next morning, I found an old photograph in my desk drawer. It showed Navajo people being marched away from their homes during the Long Walk of 1864. I'd seen it before in history books, but this time something new caught my eye. In the background, barely visible, was a man who looked exactly like me. Same face, same build, even the same small scar above my right eyebrow from when I fell off my bike. As a kid, that's impossible. The photo was taken 125 years ago. I took out my magnifying glass. The man was wearing modern boots, the exact same Red Wing work boots I wear to the mines every day. I dropped the photo like it was on fire. Later that day, the company nurse took blood samples from all the inspectors. Routine testing, they said. When she drew my blood, the vial felt warm in her hand. Too warm. She looked confused, then alarmed as the vial began to smoke. She dropped it, and when it hit the floor, my blood burst into flames. Small blue flames that smelled like sage and gasoline. "I've never seen that before," she whispered, her face pale. "That's not possible." They took another sample. This one didn't catch fire. They sent it to a lab in Albuquerque. 2 days later, my supervisor called me into his office. "There's been a mistake with your blood work," he said, not meeting my eyes. "What kind of mistake?" I asked. "The lab says..." He paused. "They say your DNA shows markers that aren't human, and some markers they've never seen before in any living thing. They're running the tests again." I laughed it off, said it must be contamination, but inside, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break my ribs. Walking back to my truck, my Geiger counter started clicking in my pocket. I hadn't turned it on. When I took it out, the clicks formed a pattern. Short, short, long, short, short, long, like Morse code, like it was trying to tell me something. That night, I dreamed I was at a tribal council meeting. I was speaking perfect Navajo, not the broken, phrases I know in real life, but flowing, beautiful Navajo with words I've never heard before. I was warning the elders about something coming from the mines, something hungry and ancient that wore human faces like masks. I woke up still speaking Navajo, the words pouring out of me like water. It took almost 5 minutes before I could make myself stop. At work, things got even weirder. I was reviewing old safety reports I'd filed, and they weren't the same reports. I remembered writing, where I had noted safe levels. The reports now showed dangerous contamination. My signature was on reports I know I never wrote, describing violations I had deliberately ignored. "What is this?" I asked Sharon, the records clerk. She looked confused. "Those are your reports, Joe. The ones you've been filing all along." "No," I insisted. "I never reported these violations. I covered them up." Her eyes went wide, and I realized what I'd just admitted, but instead of looking shocked or angry, she just looked sad. "Joe," she said quietly, "you've been reporting these problems for years. The company keeps ignoring you. Don't you remember all the fights you've had with management about this?" I didn't remember, not even a little bit. Walking back to my car, I saw something impossible. The desert was blooming, not with the usual sparse wildflowers, but with strange plants I'd never seen before. They had thick, waxy leaves and flowers that glowed faintly green in the shadows. They smelled sweet but wrong, like fruit that's just starting to rot. They were growing in a perfect circle around the main entrance to mine number 7. I knelt down to look closer. The plants seemed to pulse, like they had tiny heartbeats. When I reached out to touch one, it curled toward my finger like it was trying to grab me. I jumped back and nearly fell over. That's when I noticed my birth certificate had fallen out of my pocket. I always carry it because of the constant ID checks at the mines, but the name on it wasn't right. It said Joseph White Eagle, not Joseph Crow Feather. My parents' names were different too. I checked my wallet. My driver's license still said Crow Feather, but my tribal ID card said White Eagle. My social security card showed a third name I didn't recognize at all. Standing there with 3 different versions of who I was supposed to be, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and saw my grandmother again, but this time she wasn't alone. Standing next to her was a tall figure that kept shifting. One moment it looked like Mr. Peterson, the mining company's regional director. The next moment it was Chief Begay from the tribal council. Then it was a BIA official I'd met once at a land rights meeting. Its face kept changing, but its eyes stayed the same, cold and empty as the bottom of a mine shaft. "Joseph," my grandmother said, her voice oddly calm, "it's time you met what you've been serving all these years." The thing smiled with too many teeth. When it spoke, its voice was 2 voices at once, one speaking Navajo, one speaking English, both saying different things. The English voice said, "We've been watching you, Joseph. You've been very helpful to our interests." The Navajo voice said, "We've been inside you, Joseph, growing like a tumor in your spirit." I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe. My grandmother put her hand on my arm. It felt ice cold. "Remember when I died, Joseph?" she asked. 3 years ago," I whispered. "In the hospital, lung cancer." She shook her head, looked deeper, and suddenly I did remember. Not the peaceful hospital death I'd been carrying in my head. The real memory crashed through. My grandmother, standing with other elders in front of bulldozers at Mine No. 2, the private security guards pushing them aside, her falling, hitting her head on a rock, the company doctor declaring it an accident, me standing by doing nothing, saying nothing, signing the accident report that claimed she'd been trespassing. "You've been dead for 12 years, I whispered. She nodded. "Killed by what you protect. I've been trying to reach you ever since." The shifting thing stepped closer. With each step, my Geiger counter clicked faster, the radiation levels climbing impossible high. It reached out a hand that changed from pale white to brown and back again. "You're almost one of us now, Joseph," it said in those terrible double voices. "The radiation has been changing you, preparing you. Soon you'll be able to shift between worlds too, no longer trapped by one identity." "What are you?" I managed to ask. My grandmother answered, "It is what happens when greed meets suffering. When conquest puts on a friendly face. When they take everything and make you thank them for the leftovers." The thing nodded, its head briefly becoming a coyote's before shifting back to human. "We've always been here," it said. "We just wear different masks in different times. First we were cavalry officers and gold miners. Now we're corporate executives and government officials." It smiled again. "And sometimes we're safety inspectors who look the other way." My knees gave out, and I sank to the desert floor. The glowing flowers reached for me, curling around my boots. The thing that wasn't human reached for me too, its hand leaving a trail of light in the air. "You have a choice to make, grandson," my grandmother said. "You've been serving death for years, but it's not too late to choose life." The shifter laughed, and the sound made the flowers shiver. "Life? Look at him! He's already half ours. Show him, Joseph. Show him what you're becoming." I looked down at my hands. For a moment, they didn't look like my hands at all. They were pale, then dark, then something else entirely, something that glowed from within like those terrible flowers. I screamed. The sound echoed across the empty desert, sending a flock of ravens into the air. They circled above us, calling out in perfect English, "Choose, choose, choose." I ran all the way back to my truck. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I sped away, dust billowing behind me, not looking back to see if that thing was following me. But you can't outrun something that's already inside you. At home, I locked all the doors and windows. I sat in my kitchen with all the lights on, a bottle of whiskey in front of me. I didn't drink it. I needed to stay clear-headed. My bathroom mirror called to me like a magnet. I was afraid to look, but I had to know. The face that stared back at me kept shifting. One moment, I saw myself as I've always been. The next, I saw a traditional Navajo man with long hair and ceremonial paint. Then, most terrifying of all, a pale white businessman with short hair and cold eyes. "Which one is really me?" I whispered to the empty house. All three faces mouthed the words back at me. I slept fitfully that night, dreaming of uranium glowing in the dark earth like a cursed treasure. In my dreams, I was digging it up with my bare hands, stuffing the poisonous rocks into my mouth, feeling them burn all the way down. I woke up coughing black liquid onto my pillow. The phone rang. It was Peterson from the mining company. "Joe, we need you to come in today. There's a situation at mine number 5. "I'm sick," I said. My voice sounded strange, like it was coming from very far away. "This can't wait," Peterson insisted. "There's been a discovery. Something in the new shaft. We need someone who understands both sides to help us handle this properly." Those words again. Someone who understands both sides. Code for someone willing to betray their people. "What kind of discovery?" I asked. Peterson paused. "Remains. Old ones. Could be a burial site. We need you to advise us. Translation: they'd found ancestral graves and wanted me to help them. Cover it up or move the bones quietly. It had happened before. I'll be there in an hour, I said, already hating myself for agreeing. When I arrived at mine number 5, Peterson met me at the gate. He looked nervous, fidgeting with his hard hat. It's not just bones, he admitted as we walked toward the mine entrance. There's something else, something strange. Deep in the mine, they'd broken through into a small cavern. Inside were indeed remains, ancient burial items, pottery and bones. But in the center of the cavern was something that made my blood run cold, a pool of water that glowed bright green, not the dull green of algae, but the sickly green of radiation. My Geiger counter went wild as soon as I saw it. We think it's a natural uranium deposit that's contaminated the groundwater, Peterson said. But look at this. He pointed to markings around the pool. They looked like the petroglyphs I'd seen changing on the mesa, but these were clearly warnings, figures of men drinking the water and then transforming into twisted shapes. How old are these markings? I asked. At least 1,000 years, said the company archaeologist. Maybe older. That's impossible, I said. There was no radiation here 1,000 years ago, no uranium mining. The archaeologist shrugged. All I know is these are authentic ancient markings, and they seem to be warning about exactly what we're seeing. I stepped closer to the pool. The water moved, but not like normal water. It moved like it was alive, reaching up toward me in tiny tendrils. Peterson grabbed my arm. Don't touch it. Jenkins did yesterday. He's in the hospital now. His skin, it's changing. As if summoned by his words, my grandmother appeared on the other side of the glowing pool. Only I could see her. This is where it started, she said. Where it first came into our world. The poison was always here, waiting to be found, waiting for men greedy enough to dig it up, no matter the cost. The pool rippled, and for a moment I saw faces in it, hundreds of faces, some Navajo, some white, all twisted in pain. What is happening? I whispered. You're finally seeing the truth, my grandmother replied. This isn't just radiation poisoning, it's something older, something that was here before people, something that uses our greed against us. The shifting entity from yesterday rose slowly from the pool, water dripping from it like glowing tears. The mining employees couldn't see it, but they felt something. They backed away nervously, making excuses about checking equipment. Soon it was just me, my grandmother's spirit, and the thing that wore faces like masks. I've been waiting for you, Joseph, it said, its form settling briefly into the shape of Peterson before shifting to a tribal elder, then to a soldier from 100 years ago. You're perfect, you know. Not enough Navajo blood to be fully accepted by your mother's people. Not white enough to be embraced by your father's world. Caught between, just like me. I'm nothing like you, I said, but my voice shook. It laughed. I live in the spaces between things, between cultures, between truths. I am the lie that both sides tell themselves to justify what they do to each other. It gestured at the mine around us. You've been serving me your whole career, Joseph. Every false report, every look the other way, every time you used your Indian face to convince the tribe to accept destruction, or your white face to assure the company you could handle the native problem. The worst part was, it was right. I had done all those things. You're dying, Joseph, my grandmother said gently. The uranium has been killing you slowly for years. Your body is full of cancer that no doctor can see because it's not just in your body, it's in your spirit. I thought about the black saliva, the metallic taste, the shifting reflections, the blood that caught fire. What do you want from me? I asked the entity. To become one of my faces, it said simply. To join the space, between worlds, to help me continue to feed on the pain and confusion of this place. And if I refuse, it shrugged, briefly taking the form of a BIA official I'd met years ago. Then you die, painfully, but I'll find someone else. There's always someone else caught between worlds, willing to look the other way for the right price. My grandmother stepped forward. Or you can choose another path, Joseph. You can choose to heal rather than harm, to protect rather than exploit. How? I asked. I'm already poisoned, already dying. We are all dying, she said. The question is what we do with the time we have left, what we become after. The entity's form flickered rapidly between shapes: miner, elder, soldier, executive, coyote, raven, and things I couldn't even name. They'll never accept you, Joseph, it hissed. You're not Navajo enough. You've betrayed them too many times. At least with me. You'll have power. You'll belong somewhere. I closed my eyes. I could feel the radiation inside me, burning through my cells. I could feel the entity reaching for me, trying to pull me into its shifting existence. But I could also feel something else. The land, the dead, my grandmother, my mother, all the ancestors I'd betrayed with my compromises and cowardice. When I opened my eyes, I knew what I had to do. No, I told the entity, I won't become part of you. Its faces twisted in rage, cycling through expressions of fury from different cultures, different times. Then you'll die alone, it snarled, rejected by both worlds, forgotten. My grandmother smiled. He won't be alone, she said, and he won't be forgotten. The entity lunged at me, its form becoming something terrible, part human, part animal, part something ancient and hungry. Its hands became claws that reached for my throat. I didn't run, I didn't fight. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I began to sing. A healing song my grandmother had taught me as a child, a song I thought I'd forgotten. The words came back perfect and clear, rising from someplace deep inside me that the radiation and lies hadn't reached. The entity screamed, its form rippling violently. The glowing pool bubbled and hissed. "What are you doing?" Peterson shouted, rushing back into the cavern. "Who are you talking to?" He couldn't see what was happening, couldn't see the entity writhing between us, couldn't see my grandmother standing tall and proud, joining her voice to mine in the ancient song. The entity made one last desperate lunge at me. As its claws touched my chest, I felt a burning pain worse than anything I'd ever experienced. It was trying to tear out my heart, to take my face as its newest mask. But my song didn't stop. My grandmother's voice grew stronger, and somewhere, distant but growing closer, I heard other voices joining in. The voices of ancestors I'd never known, of the land itself, of every living thing that had been poisoned and exploited. The entity howled in fury and pain. Its form began to melt, dripping like wax back toward the glowing pool. "This isn't over, Joseph," it hissed as it retreated. "I've been here since the beginning. I'll be here long after you're gone. There will always be borders, always be people caught between worlds, always be someone willing to betray their own for the right price." It was probably right. But for the first time in my life, that someone wouldn't be me. The entity disappeared back into the glowing pool, but I knew it wasn't gone for good. It was just waiting, gathering strength. Peterson stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Joe, what the hell is going on with you?" he demanded. "Who are you talking to? What was that song?" I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. He wasn't a bad man, not really. Just another cog in a machine too big for any of us to fully see. He didn't understand what was happening here. Maybe he never would. "You need to close this mine," I said quietly. He laughed nervously. "What? We can't do that. We just hit a major deposit. This could keep the operation going for another decade." "It's not uranium," I said, "or not just uranium. It's something else. Something older, something alive." Peterson's face hardened. "You're not making any sense. Look, maybe you should take some time off. You've been working too hard. My grandmother's spirit stood beside me, her hand on my shoulder. Only I could see her, but her touch felt real. He can't understand, she said softly. He's not ready to see. I nodded. I quit, I told Peterson. Quit? You can't quit. We need you, especially with this new situation. Find someone else to help you cover it up, I said, turning to leave. Joe, be reasonable, Peterson called after me. Think about your career, your future. Where will you go? What will you do? I didn't answer. There was no point. In my heart, I already knew I didn't have much of a future left. The radiation in my body was too far gone. I could feel it eating me from the inside, changing me cell by cell. I drove straight to the tribal council building. Most of the elders knew me as the Company Indian, the sellout who helped the mining operation navigate tribal politics. They were surprised to see me walk in without an appointment, especially looking the way I did, pale, sweating, my eyes bloodshot and wild. I need to speak to the council, I said to the receptionist. It's urgent. Chief Begay happened to be walking through the lobby. He stopped when he saw me. Joseph Crow Feather, he said coolly. What brings you here? More papers for us to sign away our rights? The words stung, but I deserved them. No, I said. I need to warn you about mine number 5, about what they found there. Something in my voice must have convinced him I was serious. He led me to a small conference room where 3 other council members were meeting. For the next hour, I told them everything. About the glowing pool, about the ancient warnings carved around it, about how the radiation was moving like a living thing, about my grandmother's spirit and the entity that shifted between forms. I expected them to laugh, to call me crazy, to throw me out. But they didn't. They listened silently, their faces grave. When I finished, the oldest councilwoman, Mary Tsosi, spoke. Our stories tell of such a thing, she said. A trickster spirit born where different worlds meet. It feeds on confusion, on divided loyalties, on the pain of those caught between worlds. You believe me? I asked, shocked. Chief Begay nodded slowly. Strange things have been happening all over the reservation, animals behaving oddly. Weather, that makes no sense. People seeing the dead walk. We have been gathering reports for months. What can we do? I asked. Mary Tsosi looked at me with ancient knowing eyes. The question is, what can you do, Joseph Crow Feather? You who have walked both worlds, you who have served this thing without knowing it, you whose body now carries its poison. I didn't have an answer, but my grandmother did. She appeared in the corner of the room, and this time I wasn't the only one who could see her. Mary Tsosi gasped. Chief Begay crossed himself, mixing Christian and traditional protections. My grandson must make a choice, my grandmother said, her voice echoing strangely in the small room. He carries the poison, but that gives him power. Too, he can use it. Use it how? I asked. To bind the entity, she said. To contain it for a time, not forever. Nothing lasts forever, but long enough to warn others, to protect the next generation. It would kill him, Mary Tsosi whispered. My grandmother nodded sadly. He is already dying. The uranium has seen to that. The question is whether his death will have meaning. They all looked at me, waiting for my decision, as if I had a real choice. But maybe I did. For the first time in my life, maybe I actually did have a choice about who I was and what I stood for. Tell me what to do, I said. That night, under a sky bursting with stars, we gathered at the edge of mine number 5. The company had shut down operations for the day, but we knew Peterson and his team would be back tomorrow with more equipment, more men, ready to dig deeper into the poisoned earth. I wore ceremonial paint on my face now, designs my grandmother had shown the medicine man. Designs older than any living memory, meant to contain and channel the poison inside me. "Are you sure about this?" Chief Begay asked me one last time. "Once you begin, there is no turning back." I nodded. I had never been more sure of anything. In my life, the medicine man began to sing, a low, haunting song that seemed to make the very air vibrate. Mary Tsosi and the other elders joined in, their voices weaving together like strands of strong rope. I walked into the mine alone. My grandmother's spirit walked beside me, guiding me through the dark tunnels. I didn't need a flashlight. My skin had begun to glow faintly, the radiation inside me lighting my way. We reached the cavern with the glowing pool. It was larger now, the water having eaten away more of the rock. The ancient warnings carved. Around it seemed to move in the shifting light, the figures dancing and twisting. The entity was waiting for me. It rose from the pool, its form shifting rapidly between shapes: mining executive, government agent, tribal elder, and things not human at all. "Come to join me after all?" it asked, its double voice echoing in the cavern. "No," I said, "I've come to stop you." It laughed, the sound like rocks grinding together. "You can't stop me, Joseph. I am as old as the first lie one people told. Another, as permanent as the borders that divide the land. Not stop," I corrected. "Contain, bind, for a time." Its many faces frowned. "How? You have no power. You're just a man, a dying man at that." I stepped closer to the pool. "That's where you're wrong. I do have power, the same power you have, the poison you've been spreading. It's inside me now." I rolled up my sleeve. My arm glowed green from within, the veins standing out like rivers of fire. Years of exposure to the uranium had changed me at a level no doctor could see. "So what?" the entity hissed. "That just makes you mine already." "No," my grandmother said, stepping forward. "It makes him a bridge between worlds, between times, between what is and what could be." I understood then what I had to do. The poison in my body was killing me, yes, but it was also connecting me to the entity, to the land, to everything that had been damaged and twisted by greed and exploitation. I could use that connection. I began to sing the same healing song from before, but this time I added words. My grandmother whispered to me. Ancient words, words of binding and containing. The entity screamed, lunging for me. Its claws raked across my chest, tearing my shirt, drawing blood that glowed green in the darkness. But I didn't stop singing. The pain was tremendous, but somehow distant, as if it were happening to someone else. My blood dripped into the glowing pool. Where it touched the water, the green glow dimmed, turning dark and solid. Like cement, like a seal. "What are you doing?" the entity shrieked, its form flickering faster and faster. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The song took all my strength now. I could feel my life draining away with each note, with each drop of blood. The entity tried to flee, to sink back into the depths of the pool, but my blood had created a network of solid barriers, trapping it in an ever smaller space. "You'll die," it warned, its voice desperate now. "You'll be forgotten. No hero, no villain, just another victim. No one will even know what you did here." It was trying to bargain now, to play on my fears of insignificance. Once that might have worked. Once I had craved recognition, acceptance, belonging so badly that I was willing to betray my own conscience to get it. Not anymore. "Some will know," my grandmother said. "Some will remember. That is enough." I stumbled forward, my strength fading. 1 step, 2, 3, until I stood at the very edge of the pool. The entity reached for me with hands that were human and not human, its eyes wild with fear and rage. "Don't do this," it begged. "I can make you whole. I can give you what you've always wanted. Acceptance, belonging, a place in both worlds." I smiled through the pain. I don't need a place in both worlds, I whispered. I just need to do the right thing in this one. With the last of my strength, I fell forward into the pool. The entity screamed as my body, full of radiation and poison, crashed into it. My blood, my flesh, my bones, all transformed by years of exposure, became the final seal, the living lock on a door that had been open too long. The pain was beyond anything I could have imagined. Every cell in my body felt like it was burning, tearing apart, reforming into something else. The entity fought, clawing and biting, trying to escape the binding. But my grandmother was there, her spirit hands holding mine, her voice guiding me through the final verses of the song. And behind her, I could see others, ancestors I had never known, victims of the mines, the land itself taking human form. They joined their voices to mine. Together, we formed a chain of memory and determination that wrapped around the entity like unbreakable bands. With my last breath, I completed the binding. The pool hardened completely, turning black as obsidian. The entity's final scream was cut off suddenly, trapped inside the stone. I felt myself fading, my consciousness spreading out, becoming part of the land I had both betrayed and, in the end, protected. The last thing I heard was my grandmother's voice. "Rest now, grandson. You've chosen well. We will watch over this place together." 3 days later, a team of mining company executives arrived with government officials to investigate the mysterious collapse of mine number 5. They found the entrance sealed by what their instruments said was ordinary rock, though none of their equipment could cut through it. Peterson led the team, explaining to his bosses how the mine had been on the verge of a major find. "It was the strangest thing," he told them, staring at the sealed entrance with puzzled eyes. "The safety inspector, Joe Crowfeather, came in acting crazy, singing some native song, and then just disappeared. Next morning, the whole shaft had collapsed." "Probably on drugs," one of the executives said dismissively. "These people often would you find another inspector. We'll try a different approach, come at the deposit from the north side." But over the following months, strange things began to happen to the mining executives. Peterson developed an aggressive cancer that baffled his doctors. 2 board members died of mysterious radiation poisoning, though they had never visited the mines themselves. The company's headquarters in Phoenix reported unexplained equipment failures, black mold that grew overnight, and employees hearing voices in empty rooms. The new mine shaft they tried to dig collapsed 3 times before they gave up. On the reservation, the tribal council declared the area around mine number 5 sacred ground, off limits to development. They didn't explain why exactly, but sometimes, at night, people walking near the sealed mine entrance would see 2 figures standing guard, an old woman in traditional dress and a middle-aged man whose form seemed to shift in the moonlight between Navajo and white and something else entirely, and if you listened very carefully you could hear them singing.